He was hired to find one man. He was never supposed to find out why. Cold Run. Chapter 1. The diner sat alone on a stretch of two-lane blacktop where the desert hadn't decided yet if it wanted to be scrub or sand. A sign out front read Ruthie's in red neon, half the letters dead, so at night it probably just said THS. Heat already shimmered off the gravel lot at 7 in the morning. A grasshopper the size of a thumb clung to the screen door and didn't move when Cole Walker's boots crunched past it. He'd clocked the lot before he cut the engine. 3 vehicles. A rust-eaten pickup with a gun rack and no gun in it. A minivan with a Grand Canyon sticker peeling off the back window. And a black Lincoln Town car, washed that morning, parked nose out in the far corner like somebody wanted a clean exit. Cole backed his SUV into a space 2 down from the pickup, engine facing the road the same as the Lincoln. Old habit. He shut the door with a click instead of a slam, hitched his backpack over one shoulder, and crossed the lot. Inside smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee and something with cinnamon in it. A ceiling fan turned lazy circles that didn't do much against the heat. 6 booths, a counter with 4 stools bolted to the floor, a pass-through window to the kitchen where somebody was scraping a griddle. Only one booth was taken, back corner facing the door, window at his shoulder. Man in a gray suit that cost more than the diner's monthly take. Cole walked the aisle without hurrying. The man watched him come the whole way, didn't smile, didn't stand. When Cole reached the booth, the man looked up from a thin manila folder and tipped 2 fingers at the bench across from him. "You're punctual," the man said. "I appreciate that in a person." "You're early." Cole slid in, dropped the backpack on the seat beside him. "That's different. I like to see who's coming before they see me." The man had a coffee cup in front of him, half gone cold by the look of the skin on top. He hadn't touched the menu. "Voss," he said, like it was an answer to a question Cole hadn't asked. "Just Voss." "For today." A waitress arrived with a pot before Cole could say anything else, hip-cocked, name tag that said Dot, even though the sign said Ruthie's. "Coffee, hun." "Please." "Anything to eat?" "Pie's fresh, but I'd steer you off the meatloaf. We're still working through Tuesdays." "Just the coffee." "Suit yourself." She filled his mug, glanced at Voss's cup, decided against topping it off, and moved on toward the pickup driver at the counter, who was already complaining about something to do with his eggs. Voss waited until she was out of earshot. Then he turned the folder around on the table and slid it the rest of the way across with 2 fingers, the way a man moves a chess piece he's already decided he's going to regret. Cole opened it. One photograph. A man in his late 30s, gray suit not much different from Voss's own, standing on a sidewalk outside a glass office tower, caught mid-stride like the camera had taken him without asking. "Marcus Baker," Voss said. "Mid-level analyst. 6 years with the company, spotless file, until 4 days ago." "Which company?" "Doesn't matter for what you're doing. It'll matter if I have to walk into their building." "You won't." Voss said it flat, the way people say things they want to be true. 3 days ago, Baker walked out of a secure facility with a full set of data plans he had no clearance to touch. AI targeting architecture. The kind of thing that gets people very interested very fast, and not the kind of interested that ends well for him. Cole studied the photograph under the window light. Wedding ring, no watch, shoes too new for a man who'd apparently been running for 3 days. He looks like an accountant. He is, more or less. Numbers, systems, a little coding. Not a field man. Not trained for any of this. Then how's he still moving? Voss's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it." "You don't, or the company doesn't want me to have it." "Same thing from where you're sitting." Voss folded his hands on the table. "Your job is simple. Find Baker. Bring him back, along with everything he took, before he delivers it to whoever he's delivering it to. Who's he delivering it to? We don't know. You don't know, or? We don't know, Voss said again, sharper this time, and for a second something moved behind his eyes that wasn't quite patience. He caught it, smoothed it over. If we knew, Mr. Walker, I wouldn't be sitting in a diner at 7 in the morning talking to you. I'd have sent people with badges. Cole closed the folder, left his hand flat on top of it. Outside the window, the highway ran off toward the horizon, empty in both directions, heat already starting to bend the air over the blacktop. Where was he last? An airstrip. Private, unregistered. Used to belong to a crop dusting outfit that folded years back. 2 hours west of here. We have confirmation. He was there yesterday afternoon. Confirmation how? Does it matter? It might. Voss considered that a second too long. A phone ping. Off a burner he bought 2 towns from his office the day he ran. He's smart enough to buy a burner, and dumb enough to keep carrying it. People make mistakes when they're frightened. Voss reached into his jacket and set a small sealed envelope on the table next to the folder, squared it up with 2 fingers like it mattered that the corners lined up with the table edge. Payment on delivery. Half again if it's clean. No press, no bodies, nothing that puts the company's name anywhere near a headline. Cole looked at the envelope without picking it up. And if it's not clean? Then it's not clean, and we deal with that when it happens. Voss's eyes came up and held there. I'd rather it didn't happen. So would I. I'm the one who has to be there when it doesn't. That got the closest thing to a real smile Cole had seen out of him yet. Gone as fast as it came. Voss pushed his cold coffee an inch to the side, like he was clearing space for something, though nothing came next. Cole opened the folder again, looked at Baker's face a second time, the eyes mostly, trying to find whatever it was that made a spreadsheet man walk out of a building with something that could get him killed. He turned the photograph over. Blank white back. No help there. He's got a wife, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Separated. She's not involved, and I'd like to keep it that way. Kids? None. Anybody who'd hide him? Family, friends, and old service buddy. Voss's hesitation was small, but Cole had spent a long time learning to read small hesitations off people who didn't want to be read. We're still building that picture, Voss said. You'll have a file sent to your phone by the time you're on the road. Whatever we have. Whatever you have. Cole slid the folder into his backpack, left the envelope where it sat a moment longer, then took that too. I'll leave now. 2 hours west, Voss said again, like Cole might not have caught it the first time. The strip's called Ashfield. Nothing out there but dirt, and a fuel shack that hasn't held fuel since Reagan was in office. If he's smart, he's already gone. If he's lucky, whoever else wants that data hasn't found him first. Cole stopped halfway out of the booth. Whoever else wants it. A figure of speech. You don't strike me as a man who wastes figures of speech. Voss didn't answer that. He picked his coffee back up, looked at it like he'd forgotten it was cold, and drank it anyway. Cole stood, backpack over one shoulder, and looked down at him a second longer than he needed to. Then he walked, not toward the door yet, but toward the counter where Dot was refilling the pickup driver's mug and half listening to him complain. Ma'am. Cole set a 5 on the counter. That coffee's on me. And whatever pie he doesn't get to. Well, aren't you a gentleman? She rang it without asking why. You boys have a good one. Cole pushed through the glass door into the sun. The grasshopper was gone off the screen. Across the lot, the Lincoln sat exactly where it had been, engine off now, and there was a second vehicle Cole hadn't clocked on the way in. A dark green pickup, older, parked at the far edge near the highway, engine running, exhaust shimmering behind it. Nobody visible in the cab that he could see through the glare. He didn't slow down. He crossed to his SUV at the same pace he'd crossed in, tossed the backpack on the passenger seat, and climbed behind the wheel. In the mirror, the green pickup hadn't moved. Hadn't pulled out behind him, either. Cole started the engine, put both hands on the wheel, and watched the pickup in the mirror all the way to the edge of the lot. It was still sitting there, engine running, when he turned west onto the highway. Chapter 2. The green pickup held back for 11 miles, then 13, close enough that Cole never lost it, and far enough that it could have been anybody heading anywhere. He clocked it at every rise in the road. Same gap. Same lane position. A man driving to work doesn't hold a gap like that. He took the exit for Cabot Road without signaling, a farm cutoff that ran north through fields of something low and green, irrigation pipes ticking in the heat. In the mirror, nothing. He let out a breath he hadn't noticed holding. Then the pickup came around the bend a quarter-mile back, slowing hard to make the same turn it had no business making unless it already knew where he was going. "Okay," Cole said to no one to the windshield. "Okay." He didn't speed up. Speeding up told a man behind you that you'd made him, and a man who knew he'd been made would either close the distance or vanish, and either one was worse than what Cole had now, which was a truck that thought it was invisible. He drove Cabot Road at the same 51 miles an hour for 4 more minutes, then hit the blinker early for a Conoco station sitting alone at a crossroads, pulled in slow, parked at the pump farthest from the road, and got out like a man who needed gas and nothing more complicated than that. He fed the pump a card, hung the nozzle, and watched the crossroads over the roof of the SUV. The pickup didn't turn in. It came through the intersection at highway speed, didn't slow, didn't look, which was its own kind of tell, because nobody drives past a gas station without so much as a glance unless they're working hard at not glancing. Cole got the plate. Texas, mud-smeared on purpose or by accident, hard to tell which. He got a look at the driver too, quarter-second, sunlight flaring off the windshield. Young, ball cap pulled low, one hand on the wheel, and the other arm resting out the open window like the day was easy. The truck kept going north, and didn't come back. Cole topped off the tank he didn't need topped off. Texted the plate to a number saved under a name that wasn't a name. 3 letters, no context. A man in Tulsa who ran plates for cash and didn't ask why. And pulled back onto the road 2 minutes behind schedule and a great deal more awake than he'd been an hour ago. Ashfield wasn't on any map Cole had ever bought. Voss's file had it pinned by coordinates. A rust-colored dot on a stretch of nothing between a dry wash and a stand of dead cottonwoods. And when Cole came up on it, the entrance was exactly what he'd expected and somehow worse. A chain-link gate sagging open on one hinge, a sun-bleached sign that used to say something about crop dusting and now said nothing anybody could read, and beyond it a strip of cracked asphalt running dead straight into heat shimmer. He drove in slow, tires crackling over broken pavement, weeds pushing up through every seam. A windsock hung dead off a leaning pole, more whole than fabric. Off to the left, a fuel shack had lost half its roof to weather or time, corrugated metal curled back like a peeled lid. The plane was at the far end, nose down in the dirt off the runway's edge, one wing folded under the fuselage at an angle that made Cole's stomach drop a little just looking at it. Single engine, propeller bent back on itself like a hand curling into a fist. He parked 40 yards short and walked the rest, eyes on the ground the whole way, reading the dirt the way another man might read a page. Shell casings first, a dozen of them, maybe more, scattered in a rough arc 30 feet from the wreck. 9mm, brass, catching the sun where it hadn't been kicked into shadow. He crouched by one, didn't touch it, filed the spread in his head. 2 shooters, maybe 3, spraying wide rather than aiming close, which told him something about who'd been doing the shooting and nothing good about their discipline. The fuselage had a handprint on it in something dark that had gone the color of rust, low near the cargo door, smeared downward like whoever left it hadn't had the strength to hold on. Cole stood over it a long moment. Not enough blood on the ground beneath it to mean the man who made it had died there. Enough to mean it hurt. He worked outward from the wreck in a slow spiral, the way he'd been taught a long time ago by people who didn't exist anymore, as far as any paperwork was concerned. Tire tracks, 2 sets, both heavy, both peeling out east toward the dead cottonwoods rather than back out the gate he'd come in through. A boot print in softer dirt near the tree line, man-sized, dragging on the left side like its owner had been favoring that leg. He was crouched over the print, phone out, taking a picture he had no good way to explain if anyone asked, when he heard the engine. The cruiser came up the runway at a crawl, county markings, light bar dark. Cole stood, put the phone away, and didn't run, because a man who runs is a man who's guilty of something, and right now he wasn't guilty of anything but bad timing. The deputy who got out was younger than he expected, sharp-eyed, hand resting easy near her hip without going for anything. Name tag said Pruitt. "Help you find something out here," she said. Not hostile. Not friendly either. "Looking for a man," Cole said. "Family hired me. He's missing, they're worried. Insurance won't pay a claim on his truck until somebody confirms he's not dead in a ditch somewhere." That a fact. She looked past him at the wreck, then back. "You got a license for that kind of work?" "Louisiana." Which was true, and which he handed her when she asked, and which she looked at longer than the information on it required, comparing his face to the photo like she did this for a living, because she did. "Bit far from Louisiana. Man I'm looking for is a bit far from home too." That got him something close to a smile, gone fast. She handed the license back. "Rancher 2 miles east called this in about 5 this morning. Said he heard what sounded like a war going on out here around 2, 3 in the morning. Didn't want to drive out in the dark to find out who was fighting it. Can't say I blame him." She nodded at the wreck. "We got the plane, we got the brass, we got blood, and we got nobody. Nobody, I mean. Whoever was flying that thing either walked away or somebody carried him." "Any ID on the registration?" "Wiped clean. Tail number's been painted over twice, badly, like whoever did it was in a hurry both times." She studied him a second. "Your missing man got a name?" Cole had already decided how far he'd go with this one before she'd finished parking. "Baker. Marcus Baker." Something flickered behind her eyes. Not recognition exactly, more like a filing cabinet drawer sliding an inch. "Huh," she said. "Huh what?" "Huh, we found a matchbook out past the fuel shack this morning, half burned like somebody meant to get rid of it and didn't finish the job. Local bar, place called The Last Chance, down on the coast road about 90 minutes south of here. Didn't think much of it. Every third truck in 3 counties has got one of those matchbooks rattling around the glove box. But you say a name like Marcus Baker with that particular look on your face, and now I'm wondering." "What look?" "The look of a man who already knows more than he's telling a deputy sheriff, standing in the middle of a crime scene." She said it without heat, like she was reading a label off a can. "You want to tell me anything else, this be the time." Cole considered it, how much to give her, how much she'd give back if he did, whether a county deputy 2 hours from anywhere was an asset or a liability, in a job that was starting to smell like more than a corporate retrieval. He decided on the smallest true thing he had. "He stole something from his employer," Cole said. "Papers. Files. That's the whole job. I bring back Baker, I bring back what he took, nobody gets hurt worse than they already are." "And the shooting out here?" "Wasn't me. I got here 20 minutes before you did." "I know. I ran your plate soon as I saw the SUV." She said it flat, no apology in it, and Cole respected her a little more for not pretending otherwise. Man drives like he's got somewhere to be, and a reason not to talk about it. Figured I'd ask nice before I asked less nice. Her radio crackled at her hip, a burst of static and a dispatcher's voice flattened by distance and bad speakers. Cole caught fragments, disturbance, Route 9 motor in, possible weapons, before Pruitt turned half away from him and thumbed the mic. "Copy, dispatch, say again." The voice came back clearer this time, close enough that Cole didn't have to strain for it. "Report of a fight at the Route 9 motor inn. 2 men down, according to a witness, one of them possibly armed. Caller hung up before giving a full description. Nearest unit requested to respond. Pruitt looked at Cole. Cole looked back at her, already doing the math. Route 9 was the same stretch of road he'd checked into last night before the diner. The same stretch a man running scared and hurt might land on if he needed somewhere close and cheap and off the highway cameras. That means something to you, she said. Might. Cole was already moving, already 3 steps toward the SUV before he'd finished the word. You headed that way. That's my job, yeah. Then I guess we're headed the same direction. He didn't wait for her to agree to that. He was in the SUV with the engine turning over before she'd made it back to the cruiser, gravel kicking out from under his tires as he swung around the wreck and pointed the hood south toward the highway, toward a motel he'd left 8 hours ago that had apparently gotten a great deal more interesting since. Chapter 3. Pruitt's radio crackled again before they'd made the gate. Dispatch to 412, be advised. County needs you to hold at the strip until crime scene arrives from Alamos. ETA 40 minutes. They want the scene secured, not walked through twice. Pruitt keyed the mic without slowing the cruiser. Copy, dispatch, but I've got a possible connection to the Route 9 call. Requesting to divert. Negative 412. Corporal wants you on scene. Unit 803 is already rolling on Route 9, closer than you anyway. A pause. Cole watched it happen through his windshield, watched her hand tighten on the mic, watched the muscle in her jaw work before she thumbed the switch again. Copy. 412 holding at the strip. She pulled the cruiser to the shoulder, gravel spitting, and Cole slowed alongside her, window already down. You heard that, she said. Not a question. I heard it. Then you wait too. 803'll be there in 15. You go stomping in there ahead of a badge. You're liable to get shot by somebody who doesn't know you from Adam, or arrested by somebody who does. I appreciate the concern. That's not concern, that's procedure. She leaned across the seat, studied him through his open window like she was deciding whether he was worth the breath. Walker. I mean it. I know you do. Cole put the SUV back in gear. I'll try not to get shot. Walker. He was already rolling, gravel crunching under the tires, her voice cut off by distance and the wind coming through the window. In the mirror, she didn't chase him. She stood by the open cruiser door, hands on her hips, watching him go, the way a woman watches a dog that's decided the leash is a suggestion. The Route 9 motor inn sat off the highway, behind a gravel apron and a sign missing its O, so it read M-Tor in tired orange letters. Cole came off the highway doing better than the limit, and cut the speed only when he saw the first of it. A door standing wide on the ground floor row, room 6, dark inside, and a woman in a bathrobe standing 3 doors down with both hands pressed over her mouth. He parked at an angle that gave him the lot and the room both, killed the engine, and moved fast without running. The same walk he'd used crossing the diner the morning before, except now his eyes were doing a different kind of work, corners, sight lines, anything that could hide a man with a gun. The office door banged open before he reached it. A kid, 20 maybe, name tag crooked, face the color of old paper. You call this in? Cole said. I mean, my manager did, there was yelling, and then it wasn't yelling anymore, it was just, the kid's hands were shaking. Are you a cop? I'm the guy who's going to ask you questions faster than the cops will. And you're going to answer them, because the cops are going to make you fill out a form first and I'm not. Cole kept his voice level, no heat in it, which seemed to settle the kid more than shouting would have. Room 6. Who checked in? Guy paid cash last night, real late. Said his name was, hold on, the kid fumbled with a clipboard, dropped it, picked it up. Said his name was Wilson. Didn't have a car. I remember that, 'cause we don't get walk-ins out here, there's nothing to walk in from. What did he look like? Beat up. Like he'd been in a wreck. Had blood on his shirt, wouldn't let me get a good look, kept his head down. The kid swallowed. Then this morning, maybe an hour ago, 2 guys came asking for him. Didn't give a name, just described him. Suit, dark hair, said he was their coworker, said he wandered off after an accident and they were worried. You believe that? I didn't much care. I told him what room. They went and knocked, and then he gestured helplessly at room 6. Then that. Cole left him standing in the doorway and crossed the lot at a clip, senses working overtime. A green sedan 2 spaces down from his own SUV, engine ticking as it cooled, somebody's idea of subtle. He filed it and kept moving toward room 6. The door had been kicked, not picked, splinters around the frame, deadbolt still seated and a chunk of ruined jam. Inside, the room told its own story without needing anyone to narrate it. A lamp on its side, bulb still glowing weakly against the carpet. A chair on its back. Blood on the bathroom door, in a smear that started at shoulder height and ran down, like somebody had used the door to stay upright on the way past it. The bathroom window stood open. Screen popped loose and lying in the dirt outside. A drag mark in the gravel leading toward the tree line at the back of the property. Baker had gone out that window under his own power, or close enough to it. That was something. Cole crouched by the sill, found a fresh smear of blood on the frame. Not much. A man moving fast and bleeding slow rather than a man being carried. He was still crouched there when he heard the car door. 2 men had gotten out of the green sedan while he was inside. One stood by the trunk, arms loose at his sides, in the particular way of a man who's carried a weapon long enough that not carrying one feels wrong. The other was closer, already crossing the lot toward room 6 with a directness that had nothing friendly in it. Help you with something? Cole said, stepping out through the broken door into daylight. Wrong question. The closer man had a build like a linebacker gone soft at the edges, but not slow, not even close, and a face that had absorbed a few decisions it regretted. Questions what you're doing in our friend's room. Your friend check in under the name Wilson, or is that just what he told the desk? That got a flicker, small, controlled. But Cole had spent his whole adult life learning to read the flicker under a controlled face, and this man said he knows more than he should. You're going to want to walk away from this, the man said. Whatever you think you're doing here. I think I'm looking for the same guy you're looking for. Cole kept his hands loose, weight balanced, 6 feet of gravel between them and closing slow. Difference is I get paid, whether he's breathing or not. You look like a man who needs him breathing. The second man, the one by the trunk, was moving now too, circling wide, and Cole clocked the play a half second before it happened. Pincer, 1 high, 1 low, textbook, and about a decade out of practice, which was the only reason Cole was still standing a minute later instead of face down on the gravel. The closer man threw first, a big looping right that would have put Cole's lights out if it had landed anywhere close to where it was aimed. It didn't. Cole stepped inside it, drove an elbow up under the man's jaw hard enough to snap his head back, and used the follow-through to put him into the side of the green sedan, metal booming under the impact. The second man came in low, trying for the legs, and Cole sprawled his hips back, caught a fistful of collar, and used the man's own momentum to redirect him face first into the open trunk lid. It closed on him halfway, not all the way, just enough to fold him over the bumper gasping. The first man wasn't done. He came off the car with blood on his teeth, and a knife out of nowhere, low guard, the kind of grip that meant he'd used it before and meant to use it again. Cole gave ground, circling, put the open door of room 6 at his own back so nothing could come from behind, and when the man lunged, Cole caught the wrist, twisted hard enough to feel something give, and put him down on the gravel with a knee between his shoulder blades before the knife had finished clattering away across the lot. Where is he? Cole said low, close to the man's ear. Wilson. Baker. Whatever you're calling him. Go to hell. That's not an answer. The man spat gravel and blood, and said nothing else worth repeating. Cole checked him for a wallet, found none, found instead a phone in his jacket pocket, screen still lit from a text thread he hadn't gotten to answer. Cole thumbed it awake, one eye on the second man still folded over the trunk, wheezing. Sorrell wants confirmation. Location. Above it, a name saved as a contact, no last name, just D. Sorrell. Cole was still looking at it when the screen changed under his thumb. A new message rolling in from the same thread, 3 dots blinking, and then resolving into words that made the back of his neck go cold in the middle of all that heat. He's not alone anymore. Somebody's helping him move. Confirm the coast plan is still on. Somewhere behind him, distant but closing, a siren started climbing the grade off the highway. Chapter 4. Cole left the 2 men on the gravel and didn't look back to see how either of them was doing. The one with the ruined wrist was already trying to sit up, swearing steady and quiet like a man saying a rosary. The other hadn't moved off the trunk lid. Neither of them was Cole's problem once the siren crested the grade behind the tree line, close now, close enough that he could hear the engine under it. He went out the same way Baker had. Through the bathroom window, boots hitting gravel, the drag mark from Baker's blood leading him toward the tree line before he cut sideways instead, circling wide around the back of the motel to come up on his own SUV from the side the cruiser wouldn't be watching. He was behind the wheel and rolling before the first flash of light bar color hit the gravel apron out front, easing onto the highway going the opposite direction, unhurried, a man with nothing to hide doing the speed limit. In the mirror, the cruiser's lights swept the motel lot and stopped. Nobody chased him. Nobody had reason to yet. He drove 4 miles before his hands stopped wanting to shake, which they didn't do from fear so much as leftover adrenaline with nowhere to go, and pulled into a Sinclair station with a green dinosaur sign faded pale from 30 years of sun. The woman behind the counter had a coffee pot going, and a paperback open face down next to the register, cover worn soft from handling. Her tag said Deb. Help you? Maybe. Cole set a 20 on the counter, didn't ask for anything with it yet. You work last night? Every night this week. My relief's got the flu. She eyed the 20, then him, weighing something. You a cop? No. Bail bondsman? Closer, but no. Well, you're honest about it, I'll give you that. She left the 20 where it sat. What do you want to know? Man came through here last night, or early this morning. Beat up, maybe bleeding, probably in a hurry. Might have been looking for a ride. Deb didn't hesitate, which told Cole she'd been waiting for someone to ask. Yeah. About 4 a.m., give or take. Scared the daylights out of me, honestly. Comes stumbling in here holding his side like he'd been in a car wreck, wanted to know if I had a phone he could use, said his had died. She refilled her coffee without being asked, a habit more than a need. I told him we don't have a customer phone no more, liability. And he just about cried right there at the counter. Felt bad for him. Gave him a bottle of water and let him sit a minute. He say where he was headed. Not to me. But there was a trucker gassing up out front, big rig, Coastal Freightways painted on the side. And I saw the 2 of them talking through the window while the guy filled his tank. Next thing I know, beat-up fellas climbing up into the cab and they're pulling out. She shrugged. Figured it wasn't my business past that. You catch the trucker's name? Company, plate, anything. Company's on the side of every truck they run, hun. That's not exactly a secret. Coastal Freightways, out of Corpus. As for the driver, she squinted, thinking. Big fella, gray in his beard, had one of them personalized plates on the front bumper, novelty thing, said Dale O, or something close to it. Don't quote me on the O. Cole slid the 20, the rest of the way across the counter. You've been more help than you know. Y'all be careful, she said, not really a question, pocketing the bill without counting it. Whatever this is. Coastal Freightways answered on the 4th ring. A dispatcher with a voice like she'd been doing this since dirt was invented. And it took Cole 11 minutes, a fake name, and a story about a lost wallet supposedly left in one of their cabs to get what he actually wanted. A route, a driver named Dale Ostrander, and confirmation that Dale's manifest had him running product down to a distribution yard outside Corpus Christi, due in that afternoon, with a scheduled fuel stop at a truck stop off I-10 called the Big Sky, 90 minutes south. Cole made it there in 70. The big sky was a small city unto itself, diesel pumps in long rows, a diner attached like an afterthought, a lot full of idling rigs with their running lights on even in daylight. Cole walked the rows until he found coastal freightways painted on a trailer, a man matching Deb's description, leaning against the front bumper with a paper cup of coffee and a cigarette he wasn't smoking so much as holding. "Dale?" The man looked over, unhurried, the look of somebody who'd been asked his name by strangers before and hadn't always liked how it went. Depends who's asking. Somebody who's not a cop, not the company, and not going to make trouble for you. Cole stopped a respectful distance off, hands visible easy. "You gave a man a ride early this morning. Beat up, scared, probably didn't say much." Dale's face did something complicated, guilt and defiance fighting for the same real estate. "I don't make a habit of picking up strays. But the boy looked like death warmed over, and I got a boy of my own about that age, and," he shrugged, took a real drag off the cigarette this time. "Figured Jesus wouldn't mind me being late on my manifest by 20 minutes if it meant not leaving a bleeding man on the shoulder." "Where'd you drop him?" "Made him get out about 40 miles back. Told him I couldn't carry him all the way to Corpus. Company's got cameras in the yard. Can't be explaining a stowaway to the foreman." Dale flicked ash onto the pavement. "Dropped him near a crossroads, little nothing town. There's a bar there he seemed to know the name of before I even said it. Told me he had a friend, could help him. Last Chance, I think it's called. Real original." Cole felt something settle into place, the second confirmation of a name he'd already had once, from a torn matchbook a deputy had mentioned in passing at a crash site 2 hours north. Two separate threads pointing at the same bar was not a coincidence Cole believed in. "He say anything else? Anybody with him? Anybody meeting him?" "Just that he needed to get to the coast." Said it twice, actually, like he was talking himself into believing it. Dale studied Cole a second, something shrewd surfacing under the trucker diner friendliness. "You gonna hurt him, whoever you are?" "No." "You saying that 'cause it's true, or 'cause it's what a man says?" "Both, hopefully." Cole held his eyes. "I get paid to bring him back in one piece. That's the whole job." Dale seemed to decide that was good enough, or at least good enough for a stranger at a truck stop who wasn't going to answer to him either way. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. "Good luck to you, then." And to him. Cole called Voss from the SUV, engine running, AC fighting a losing battle against the heat coming off the asphalt in waves. Voss picked up on the second ring. "Tell me something good." "I've got a name. Dade Sorrell. Ring any bells?" A pause, brief, the kind that meant something even when the voice on the other end tried to sound bored through it. "Should it?" "You tell me." "He's running a crew. At least 4 men I've seen, and they hit the same airstrip I did about 12 hours ahead of me. Shot the place up, trying to grab Baker off a plane. Missed. Freelancers." Voss said it like the word tasted bad. "Corporate espionage draws them out sometimes. Doesn't change your job." "It changes my job a lot, actually. If there's another team working the same target with guns and no interest in bringing him back breathing." Cole kept his voice level, watching a rig pull out of the lot in his mirror. One of his men had a phone. Text thread talking about the coast plan. Somebody telling him Baker's not alone anymore, somebody's helping him move. "You want to tell me who that might be?" "I have no idea." "You have no idea, or you don't want to say?" "Mr. Walker." Voss's voice cooled a degree, precise now, the diner warmth gone out of it entirely. "You were hired to retrieve an asset and a person. You were not hired to run counter-surveillance on every interested party who might be circling this. Focus on Baker. Let me worry about Sorrell." "That's convenient, since you already knew the name." Silence on the line, just long enough to answer the question Cole had actually asked, whether Voss meant to answer it that way or not. "I knew the name," Voss said finally. "I didn't share it, because it wasn't relevant to your task. It's relevant now. Somebody shot up a plane, looking for the same man I'm looking for, and you're telling me not to worry about it. I'm telling you to do the job you're being paid very well to do. A beat. Where are you now? Cole looked out at the big skies rows of idling trucks, at the heat shimmer standing up off the blacktop, at Dale's rig already 3 lanes over and pulling toward the exit. He thought about how easy it would be to answer that question honestly, and how little reason he had left to. Working the trail, he said. I'll call when I've got him. He hung up before Voss could push back, and sat a moment with the phone warm in his hand, the recovered cell from Sorrell's man still sitting in the cup holder where he'd tossed it that morning. He picked it up, thumbed back through the message thread past the part he'd already read, scrolling up into older messages he hadn't gotten to yet. 3 days back before any of this, a message from the same saved contact, D. Sorrell, that made Cole go very still in the driver's seat. Client says Argus test data is compromised beyond the theft. Confirmed nobody talks to press or feds before extraction. This gets contained quietly, or it doesn't get contained at all. Cole read it twice. Then he found another name in his own contacts, one he hadn't called in over a year, and pressed dial before he'd fully decided to. It rang twice. A voice picked up, already talking before Cole got a word in. If this is about money, I don't have it. And if this is about the thing in Reno, I wasn't there. Milo. It's Walker. A different kind of silence this time, the kind that meant a man was sitting up straighter wherever he was. Cole Walker. Well, hell. It's been a minute. I need you to look at something for me. Tonight, if you can. Depends what it is. A program called Argus, Cole said. And I need to know exactly what it does, and exactly why somebody's willing to kill to keep it quiet. Chapter 5. Not on the phone, Milo said. Not this one. You want to talk, Argus? You come sit in my kitchen like a normal person. So Cole drove 2 hours north to a college town called Hartwell, past a university with a stadium bigger than the rest of the town combined, into a neighborhood of duplexes with bicycles chained to every porch rail. Milo's place sat at the end of a dead-end street, curtains drawn in the middle of the afternoon, a security camera bolted above the door at an angle that covered the whole walkway and most of the street besides. Milo answered before Cole finished knocking, like he'd been watching the feed. He hadn't aged well since the last time, thinner, grayer at the temples, but the eyes were the same, quick and a little manic, a man who'd spent too many years assuming everyone was listening. You look like hell, Milo said by way of hello. Long few days. Get in here before you make my street interesting. Milo stepped back to let him through 3 locks behind him without seeming to think about it, and led Cole down a hallway stacked with cardboard boxes into a kitchen that had given up being a kitchen years ago. 2 monitors sat where a coffee maker should have been. A third balanced on top of the actual refrigerator, cables running down the side of it like ivy. Sit, Milo said, gesturing at a chair that had a laptop bag on it, which he did not move. Cole moved it himself and sat. You eat something in the last 12 hours, or are we doing this on fumes? Fumes is fine. Tell me about Argus. Milo dropped into the chair across from him, cracked his knuckles theatrically, and pulled the middle monitor around so they could both see it. Okay. So, first thing, you said Halbrook. That helped narrow it, 'cause Halbrook's got about 6 divisions, and half of them I wouldn't touch with somebody else's fingers, let alone mine. Defense adjacent. AI targeting, best I can tell. Yeah, that's the one I was afraid of. Milo pulled up a folder, a mess of file names that meant nothing to Cole, and started talking while he worked, fingers never stopping. Argus isn't a weapon, not exactly. It's the brain that decides what the weapon shoots at. You've got drones, you've got ground platforms, whatever. Argus is the layer that looks at a thermal signature or a shape or a pattern of movement and says that's a combatant, light it up, or that's not, stand down. Companies have been chasing this for a decade. Halbrook apparently got there first, or close to it, or close enough to sell it that way. And it doesn't work. It works fine, 90-something% of the time, which sounds great until you remember what the other however many percent means in practice. Milo turned the monitor fully toward Cole. A wall of test logs, timestamps, columns of numbers that meant nothing to him on their own. This is internal QA data. Somebody ran Argus through a battery of edge case simulations about 8 months back. Crowded environments, civilians mixed with combatants, low light, bad weather, the stuff that actually happens in the real world instead of a clean testing range. And in a meaningful chunk of those runs, it got it wrong. Wrong how? Wrong like it flagged non-combatants as threats under specific conditions. Groups moving together, certain thermal profiles, certain. I don't fully understand the modeling, honestly, that's not my end of this. But the short version is, there's a documented failure mode where Argus can't reliably tell a crowd of scared civilians from a crowd of armed men. And somebody at Halbrook knew that 8 months ago. Milo tapped the screen. And instead of pulling the program back for a redesign, look at the date stamp on this next file. He clicked. A different document opened, cleaner, formatted like something meant for executives rather than engineers. 6 weeks after the failure data comes in, Milo said, Halbrook signs a contract. Big one. I can't get you the full terms. That part's locked down tighter than the test data was. But the summary memo references accelerated deployment timeline and acceptable risk threshold, which is corporate for we know it's broken and we're shipping it anyway. Cole sat with that a moment, looking at numbers he didn't fully understand and didn't need to. The shape of it was clear enough without the math. Baker worked on this. Baker's name is all over the QA data. He's the one who ran a lot of these simulations. My guess, and it's a guess, I want to be clear I'm reading between lines here, Baker's the guy who found the flaw, tried to raise it up the chain, and got told to keep his head down and finish the deployment package. Milo leaned back, chair creaking. So instead, he made copies. Not to sell. There's no reason to sell your own employer's dirty laundry to a foreign buyer if what you actually want is for the dirty laundry to get aired. If Baker wanted money, he'd have gone quiet about it and sold the whole Argus architecture to the highest bidder 6 months ago when he first found the flaw. He didn't. He sat on it, tried to go through channels, and only ran when it got dangerous. How do you know it got dangerous? Because you called me asking about a man being chased by mercenaries, Cole. That's usually a pretty good sign. Somebody decided quiet wasn't working anymore. Cole didn't say anything to that. Outside, a dog barked twice at something and quit. There's one more thing, Milo said, and something in his voice had gone careful, the tone of a man deciding how much to hand somebody who hadn't asked for it yet. You mentioned a name. Voss. What about him? I ran it against some things while you were driving up. Voss doesn't exist anywhere that matters. No property, no court records, nothing older than about 4 years, which tells me it's a work name for somebody. But the firm he's operating under, the LLC that's been paying for hotel rooms and rental cars, matching a pattern that looks a whole lot like your guys' movements this week, that traces to something called Sable Group. Private security and investigations. Does a lot of quiet contract work for corporations who don't want their own security badge showing up on a job. Contracted by who? That's the part one couldn't get clean. But Sable's billing records. And don't ask how I got a peek at billing records. That's a favor I'm never getting back. Show a standing retainer from Halbrook's Internal Security Division. Signed off by somebody with the initials GC. Milo shrugged. Could be anybody. Could be nothing. But your client's not protecting Halbrook's stolen property out of the goodness of his heart. He's on a corporate leash, same as everybody else in this. He's just wearing a nicer suit about it. Cole looked at the test data still glowing on the screen, at Baker's name, buried in a column of numbers that represented, as far as he could tell, a decision somewhere in a boardroom to trade lives for a deadline. He thought about the photograph in the folder, the man in the gray suit outside the glass tower, the wedding ring and the 2 new shoes. A spreadsheet man who'd found something he couldn't unsee and hadn't known how to carry it quietly. The job Voss had described in the diner, retrieve an asset and a person, had never been the whole truth. Cole had known that the moment Voss hesitated over a simple question about family. He just hadn't known, until now, how big the gap was between the job as described and the job as it actually was. A soft chime came from the monitor on the refrigerator, 3 notes, insistent. Milo's head came up fast, all the loose humor gone out of his face in an instant. "That's not good," he said. "What is it?" "Intrusion alert. Somebody's probing my outer firewall, and they're not being subtle about it, which either means they're an idiot or they don't care if I know they're there." Milo was already moving, yanking cables, shutting down the middle monitor with a hard press of the power button instead of a proper shutdown. "I run 3 layers of nothing to see here on this connection. Whoever's knocking got through the first 2 in under a minute. That's not script kiddie work, Cole. That's somebody with real money behind them. Can they trace it to this address? If I don't kill the connection in about 90 seconds, yeah, probably." Milo was already stuffing a drive into his pocket, another into a shielded pouch that looked handmade. "I need you to leave. Not because I don't love the company, but because whoever's on the other end of this might already have a car on the way. And I'd rather you not be sitting in my kitchen when it shows up." Cole was on his feet before Milo finished the sentence, already reaching for the door. "Where do I find you if I need more?" "You don't, for a while. I'm burning this place tonight and going somewhere with better locks." Milo yanked the refrigerator monitor's cable free, the screen dying mid-flicker. "Go find your spreadsheet man, Walker. And watch your back. If they're good enough to get through my firewall that fast, they're good enough to have been listening to more than just this conversation." Cole was already down the hallway, already hearing, somewhere out past the drawn curtains, the low rumble of an engine slowing on a street that didn't get much traffic on a weekday afternoon. Chapter 6. The sedan on Milo's street never moved. Cole watched it from the mouth of the alley behind the duplex, engine idling, a man behind the wheel doing something with his phone that had nothing to do with watching a house, a delivery driver maybe, or somebody killing time before a shift. Cole gave it another 60 seconds anyway, the old discipline, then cut 2 blocks over on foot to where he'd left the SUV and put Hartwell behind him without ever finding out if the sedan had mattered at all. He took back roads out of caution, doubled once on a farm route that dead-ended and forced him to backtrack, and by the time he trusted the highway again, the sun had swung well past noon, and his stomach had started reminding him he hadn't eaten since the diner. He ate a gas station sandwich one-handed on I-10 doing 70, phone mounted on the dash showing a route that peeled off the interstate south, toward water, toward a stretch of coast road that ran through towns too small to have their own zip code. The land changed before the ocean did, pine giving way to scrub, scrub giving way to salt flats, the air through the vents turning heavier, wetter, carrying something briny under the diesel and asphalt smell of the road. Cole came into the town of Cutter's Bight a little after 4, a strip of weathered buildings hugging a 2-lane road with the Gulf glinting flat and silver beyond a row of docks. Shrimp boats sat tied up 3 and 4 deep, nets hung to dry, gulls working the pilings for scraps. The Last Chance sat at the far end of Maine, a squat cinder block building painted the color of an old bruise, a hand-lettered sign nailed above the door, cold beer live bait in letters that had faded to 2 different shades of the same original red. A dozen trucks and 1 motorcycle filled the gravel lot outside. Cole parked at the edge, away from the door, and went in. Inside smelled like fry oil and cigarette smoke that should have been illegal a decade ago and clearly wasn't out here. A jukebox in the corner played something with a steel guitar in it, low, half drowned by the noise of a dozen men talking over each other at the bar. Behind the counter stood a man who had to be pushing 70, built like a fence post that had weathered 100 storms in Juan, forearms inked with faded anchors and something that might have once been a mermaid. Cole took a stool at the end of the bar, away from the crowd, and waited until the old man worked his way down. "What'll it be?" "Whatever's cold." Cole set a photograph on the bar, the same one from the folder, Baker in his gray suit outside the glass tower, looking nothing at all like a man who belonged in a place like this. "And a minute of your time if you've got it." The old man's eyes went to the photo, and stayed there a beat too long, before he looked back up, face gone carefully blank, in the particular way of a man who spent a lifetime learning not to react to things. "Never seen him." "You're Choate." "Says so on my liquor license." "He was here yesterday." "Maybe the day before." Hurt, scared, probably asking for help. Cole kept his voice easy, no threat in it, just a fact laid on the bar between them. "I'm not the law. I'm not the people who shot up an airstrip 2 hours north, trying to get him back. Don't know anything about an airstrip." Choate pulled a beer from the cooler without being asked, set it in front of Cole with a thunk that suggested the conversation was over as far as he was concerned. "On the house. Now if you don't mind, I got a bar full of people who actually want service." He turned to go. Cole let him get 2 steps. "His father used to come here." That stopped him. Choate turned back slow, and something had shifted behind the careful blankness, a crack Cole had put there on purpose and was glad to see land. "Marcus's daddy was a shrimper," Cole said, guessing, building the bridge out of what little he had, and watching Choate's face to see if it held weight. "Man who'd know a place like this. Man whose son might come looking for it if he needed somewhere nobody would think to check. You don't know a damn thing about Walt Baker." Choate's voice had dropped, gone rough at the edges. "Best man I ever fished with. Died on that water out there 12 years back. Storm came up faster than the radio said it would, and I was 2 boats over and couldn't get to him in time. You understand what I'm telling you?" "I'm telling you, I understand loyalty. I'm not here to hurt his son. Everybody who comes looking for that boy says something like that." Choate leaned both forearms on the bar, close now, voice pitched just for Cole under the noise of the jukebox. "Man came through last night asking the same questions you're asking, except he wasn't half as polite about it, and I sent him off with nothing 'cause I didn't like his face. You got maybe a slightly better face. Doesn't mean you're getting more than he got." "Fair enough." Cole took a pull off the beer, let a silence sit there, the kind of silence that sometimes did more work than a question. "He tell you what he actually did?" "Why, half of Texas seems to want him dead, or worse." "Didn't ask. Wasn't my business." "It's about to be everybody's business, one way or another. He found out his company's about to get people killed with something they built, tried to stop it the right way, and they came after him for it instead of listening." Cole watched that land, watched the old fisherman's jaw work like he was chewing on something bitter. "I'm not here to drag him back to the people who did that. I'm here because if I don't find him first, the men with guns will, and I don't think they're planning on a polite conversation." Choate studied him a long moment, the jukebox winding down between songs, the bar noise rising to fill the gap. "I don't know where he is," Choate said finally, quiet. "That's God's truth. He was here maybe an hour, ate a bowl of gumbo he didn't finish, asked if I still had Walt's old boat slip. I told him it had been sold off years back. He looked like a man running out of ideas." "Where'd he go?" Choate opened his mouth to answer, and that was when the door banged open hard enough to rattle the neon beer sign in the window, and 2 men came through it who did not belong in a Shrimp Town bar any more than Marcus Baker had. Cole clocked them before they'd finished crossing the threshold. Good clothes gone rumpled with travel, the particular economy of movement that came from training rather than habit, eyes doing a fast sweep of the room that landed on Cole and Choate both, and didn't like what they found. One of them Cole recognized, or near enough. The build, the ball cap pulled low, a face that might have belonged to the driver of a green pickup that had tailed him 2 days and 200 miles ago. "We're looking for somebody," the lead man announced to the room at large, loud enough to cut through the jukebox, and half the bar went quiet out of the particular instinct small towns have for trouble that isn't theirs. He held up his phone, Baker's photo glowing on the screen. "Anybody seen this man? There's money in it." Nobody answered. Choate's hand had drifted below the bar, resting on something Cole couldn't see and didn't need to. The lead man's eyes found Cole again, lingered, and something clicked into place behind them, recognition or close enough. "You," he said. "Motel." "Small world," Cole said. It went bad fast after that, the way these things always did, faster than thought, faster than plan. The second man came around the end of the bar reaching for something at his hip, and Choate moved before Cole did. An old man's arm swinging a full bottle of well whiskey into the side of the man's head with a crack that dropped him against the bar rail like his strings had been cut. The lead man lunged, and Cole met him halfway, driving a stool into his ribs before he could clear whatever he was reaching for, following it with a short, hard elbow that put him down across a table that gave way under the weight of both of them. The bar exploded into motion around it, patrons scattering, somebody shouting for the door, a chair going over. Cole rolled off the rec table and came up in time to catch the lead man's fist glancing off his jaw, tasted copper, drove a knee up into the man's stomach hard enough to fold him, and finished it with both hands on his collar and the man's head meeting the edge of the bar once hard, enough to end the conversation for good. The second man was still on the floor by the bar rail, out cold or close to it, blood running from his scalp into the sawdust. Choate stood over him with the bottle still in hand, breathing hard, 70 years old, and grinning like a man 20 years younger. "Been a while since I got to do that," he said. They dragged both men out back before anybody thought to call the sheriff, propped them against a dumpster where they'd wake up confused and sore, and no worse than they deserved. Choate checked the second one's pockets while Cole watched the road, came up with a wallet, a burner phone, and a folded scrap of paper that made him go still. "What is it?" "Address. Boat slip, 3 miles south of here." Choate handed it over, and, not quite steady, the adrenaline finally catching up with him. "Belongs to a fella named Del Rios. Runs an engine shop out of the marina down the coast road. Marcus and him used to run around together as kids, back when Walt was still alive. Hadn't thought about that boy in years." Cole folded the paper into his jacket pocket. "You think Baker's there?" "I think if I was scared and hurt and needed somebody who wouldn't ask questions, I'd go to the one friend who still owed my daddy a favor." Choate looked at the two men slumped against the dumpster, then back at Cole, all the earlier suspicion burned off somewhere in the last 5 minutes. "You go easy on that boy when you find him. He didn't do anything wrong. Not really. Not the way these people are gonna tell it." "I know," Cole said, and meant it, and was already moving toward the SUV before Choate could ask him how he knew or what he planned to do about it now that he did. Chapter 7. The marina sat at the end of a shell road, a handful of slips, and a corrugated shed with Del Rios Marine painted across it in letters that had run in the rain and never been redone. Cole pulled in fast, gravel and crushed shell popping under his tires, and was out of the SUV before the engine finished ticking. A man came around the side of the shed at the sound, wrench still in one hand, and froze when he saw Cole wasn't who he expected. 30s, wiry, a split lip already going purple and one eye swelling shut on the same side. "You Del Rios?" "Depends who's asking. And I got a real short list of people I want to talk to right now, so make it quick." He hadn't put the wrench down. "I'm looking for Marcus Baker." "Not to hurt him." "Yeah, everybody keeps saying that part." Del Rio spat, wiped his mouth, winced at the movement. "2 guys came through here 20 minutes ago saying the exact same thing, right before one of them backhanded me for not answering fast enough. So forgive me if I don't take your word for it." "The men who did that to you, they still here?" "Gone. Took their own boat out, headed south along the channel, maybe 5 minutes behind." Del Rio stopped himself, jaw tight like he'd said more than he meant to. "Behind who?" Del Rios looked out past Cole's shoulder at the water, gray-green in the last hour of daylight, and something in his face gave way, the fight going out of it all at once. Marcus took my skiff. 22-footer, center console, half tank of gas, and he doesn't know the first thing about running a boat past a no-wake buoy. He heard those two asking around back of the shed and just bolted. Didn't even ask, just cast off and gunned it. Damn near put himself in the water doing it. Which way? South, same as the other two, 'cause there's only one channel out of here that doesn't run you into a sandbar. Del Rios was already moving toward the dock, pointing with the wrench at a second boat tied off at the far slip, sleeker, built for speed rather than fishing. That one's faster than what he's got. You know how to run a boat like that. I'll learn fast. Guess you'll have to. Del Rios tossed him the wrench, which Cole didn't need but caught anyway, then thought better of standing around and went for the lines himself, casting off bow and stern with the fast, practiced motion of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. Throttle's the black lever. Kill switch clips to your belt loop, or the engine cuts the second you go overboard, which out there tonight, trust me, you want. Channel markers are red right returning, so keep the red ones on your right heading out. After that you're past what I can tell you. Cole dropped into the boat, found the key already in the ignition, and hit the throttle before he'd fully processed the instructions, the engine roaring up out of idle and the bow lifting hard enough to put Del Rios's dock lights behind him in seconds. The channel opened into the Gulf proper a half-mile out, and the last color was draining out of the sky in long bands of orange and gray, the water gone the color of gunmetal beneath it. Cole ran the boat flat out, spray coming up over the bow in sheets that soaked him through in the first 2 minutes, eyes straining ahead for any shape darker than the water around it. He caught sight of a wake first, white water churning pale against the darkening sea, a quarter-mile ahead and closing, too fast for a man who didn't know boats to be running it, which meant either Baker had gotten lucky finding the throttle or somebody else was pushing that skiff harder than its owner had left it. A second wake showed up behind the first, wider, meaner, cutting an angle that was gaining on both of them. Cole pushed the throttle past where Del Rios's boat wanted to go, felt the hull start to shudder and pound against chop that had picked up with the wind, and closed the gap between himself and the trailing boat inch by hard 1 inch. The first shot came without warning, a flat crack that didn't sound like anything at first over the engine noise, and then sounded like everything, a spray of water kicking up 30 feet off his port side. Cole cut the wheel hard, zigzagging the way he'd been taught a lifetime ago, in water a lot warmer and a lot more dangerous than this, and heard 2 more shots go wide behind him. Baker. He didn't know if his voice carried over the engines, but he tried anyway, closing the last of the distance to the lead skiff. Marcus Baker. A face turned back toward him in the dying light, hollow-eyed, exhausted, blood-dried dark along one temple, nothing at all like the clean photograph in Cole's folder. Baker's hands were locked white-knuckled on the wheel, and for one long second the two of them just looked at each other across 10 feet of churning water, two strangers who somehow already knew everything that mattered about the other. "Who are you?" Baker shouted, voice cracking. "Somebody who's not trying to kill you. Cut your engine." "They'll catch me if I do." "They'll catch you either way. That boat can't outrun what's behind us." "Slow down, let me get alongside." Baker didn't slow down. If anything, the skiff surged forward, bow slapping hard against a swell, and Cole made the only decision that was left to make, throttled up, closed the gap to almost nothing, and jumped the space between the two hulls as they ran side by side, boots hitting the skiff's deck hard enough to stagger him into the console. Baker swung at him on reflex, a wild, exhausted blow that Cole caught on his forearm without much effort. "I'm not one of them," Cole said, close now, gripping Baker's shoulder to steady them both against the pounding of the hull. "I know what you found. I know why you ran. I'm here to get you out, not drag you back." Whatever Baker might have said to that never came, because the trailing boat's engine note changed pitch behind them, closing fast, and Cole turned in time to see it bearing down at an angle meant to ram rather than pass. Down. He shoved Baker toward the deck and grabbed the wheel himself, cutting hard to starboard, the skiff heeling over sharp enough to take on water across the low side. The other boat missed the stern by feet, not yards, close enough that Cole saw the muzzle flash of a gun firing across the gap, close enough to hear a round punch through the console inches from his hand in a spray of splintered fiberglass. Now abandoned, Cole's own boat drifted somewhere behind them in the dark, no time to think about it. He fought the skiff's wheel, trying to put distance between them and the second boat as it came around for another pass, engine screaming, and that was when the third boat's spotlight hit them both at once, blinding white. A voice through a bullhorn Cole didn't have time to make out words from before the world came apart. The collision wasn't the ramming boat at all. It was the skiff's hull finding something under the surface, a sandbar or a piling or wreckage from some older storm. And the world tipped sideways all at once, deck becoming wall becoming ceiling, water rushing up to meet him with a violence that drove the air out of his lungs before he understood he'd gone into it. Cole surfaced into chaos, engines roaring somewhere close, the spotlight sweeping wild across white-capped water, a fire starting somewhere behind him where the trailing boat's bow must have found the same obstruction the skiff had, fuel catching with a whump that lit the darkening sky orange for a moment before the flames found the water and started to die. He struck out for anything solid, lungs burning, salt stinging every cut he'd picked up in the last 12 hours, and found a floating seat cushion that kept him up long enough to get his bearings. The skiff was gone, capsized, sinking, or already sunk, he couldn't tell in the dark and the chop. No sign of Baker. No sign of the second boat's crew either, though the fire behind him suggested at least some of them had troubles of their own now. Cole treaded water in the growing dark, breath ragged, and watched the flames gutter out to nothing, leaving him alone on black water with no boat, no target, and no idea if the man he'd come to save was alive, drowned, or already back in the hands of the people who wanted him quiet. Chapter 8. Cole's boots found sand a little before 9, cold and shaking, salt water still draining out of one ear every time he tilted his head. He'd swum toward the only lights he could see, a distant string of them marking a road, and come ashore a half-mile down the beach from where he'd started, dragging a lungful of seawater with every other breath, until his knees finally gave out in the wet sand and he let himself lie there a minute, just breathing, staring up at a sky gone fully dark. His phone was dead, salt water seizing the electronics somewhere in the swim, screen black no matter how many times he pressed the button. The recovered phone from Sorrell's man had fared no better, ruined in the same crossing. He got up because staying down wasn't an option, walked the beach until it gave way to a boat ramp and a gravel lot, and stood on the shoulder of the coast road with his thumb out, until a pickup hauling an empty trailer slowed and stopped for him. "Rough night?" the driver said, an older man with a fishing cap and no evident concern about picking up a soaked stranger at 9 at night. "Something like that." Cole climbed in. "Del Rios Marine. You know it. Everybody knows it." The man pulled back onto the road. "You fall off a boat, son, or get pushed?" "Bit of both." The old man laughed like that was the funniest thing he'd heard all week, and didn't ask anything else the rest of the drive. His SUV sat where he'd left it, untouched. Del Rios came out of the shed when the pickup's headlights swept the lot, took one look at Cole, soaked through, a fresh cut along his hairline he hadn't noticed until he caught his reflection in the window, and didn't ask questions either, just handed him a towel and a bottle of water, and let him sit on the tailgate a minute before he had to say anything at all. "Marcus?" "Don't know," Cole said. "Boat went down. I didn't see him after." Del Rios's face did something complicated, grief and guilt tangled together, and he turned away toward the shed without another word, which Cole understood better than the man probably realized. He didn't have a working phone, but he had a memory for numbers that had saved his life more than once, a habit drilled into him a long time ago by people who didn't trust anything that could be seized, subpoenaed, or simply run out of battery. He borrowed the shop's landline, an actual rotary dial relic bolted to the wall by the register, and dialed a number he hadn't used in almost 2 years. It rang 4 times before a voice picked up, unhurried, faintly amused before Cole had said a word. "Nobody calls this line anymore." "Who is this, and how'd you get my landline?" Sully. It's Walker. A pause, longer than Milo's had been, more calculating. Cole Walker. Been a while. Heard you retired. Heard wrong. Cole kept his eyes on the parking lot through the shop's front window, on the dark tree line beyond it. I need information, and I need it fast. Guy named Dade Sorrell, running a crew, corporate security work gone freelance. I need to know where he's operating out of. That's a specific ask. Something shifted in Sully's tone, interest sharpening under the boredom. Costs more than the usual. I'll pay whatever. Whatever's a dangerous word to use with me, Walker, you know that. A pause, papers shuffling somewhere on the other end, or the sound of somebody pretending to shuffle papers for effect. Give me 20 minutes. I've got people who owe me favors down that way. 20 minutes turned into 40. Cole pacing the shop floor while Del Rios pretended to work on an outboard motor that didn't need the attention he was giving it. When the phone finally rang back, Sully's voice had the particular brightness of a man who thought he'd earned a bonus. Old shrimp processing plant, south end of the bay, place called Coastview that's been shut down since a hurricane took the roof off in '09. Word is Sorrell's people have been staging out of there the last 2 days, regrouping after some trouble on the water tonight. A short laugh. Trouble, I'm guessing you had something to do with, given the state of your voice. Anybody see Baker there? Alive. Couldn't confirm that part. But my guy says there's definitely somebody there guarding. Kept out of sight, moved under a tarp when they brought him in a couple hours back. Sully let that sit a second, the hook already set. You want the address or not? Cole wanted it badly enough that he didn't stop to ask himself the one question that should have stopped him cold. Why a man he hadn't spoken to in 2 years had an eager source sitting 20 minutes from a warehouse Cole had never mentioned by name, ready with an answer that fit exactly what Cole wanted to hear. He wrote the address on the back of a service invoice Del Rios handed him, thanked Sully, and was in the SUV inside of 5 minutes. Coastview looked exactly like a building that had been abandoned by a hurricane and never reclaimed, corrugated walls rusted through in patches, half the roof gone entirely, a chain-link fence sagging low enough in one stretch that Cole didn't need to look for a gate. He parked 200 yards off in a stand of dead palmetto, cut the engine, and sat a moment studying the building through the dark. No lights. No vehicles visible from this angle. That should have told him something, but exhaustion and 12 hours of adrenaline had worn a groove straight through his usual caution. And the thought of Baker under a tarp in there, alive, scared, waiting on somebody to come, pushed him out of the SUV and across the open ground faster than he should have moved. He found the gap in the fence, slipped through, crossed the last stretch of cracked concrete to a loading bay door standing open a foot, darkness beyond it thick enough to swallow a flashlight beam whole. He went in low, quiet, senses straining for anything, a voice, a shifting weight, the smell of cigarette smoke that would mean men waiting somewhere close. The lights came up all at once. Industrial floods mounted high on the rafters, flooding the whole cavernous space white and merciless. And Cole understood in the half-second before anything else happened that he'd walked into exactly what Sully had built for him. 4 men, positioned wide, weapons already up. No sign of Baker anywhere. No tarp, no hostage. Nothing but Cole standing alone in the middle of an empty floor with nowhere to go, and no cover between himself and any of them. Drop it, one of them called out, though Cole had nothing in his hands to drop. He ran instead, the only option left, cutting hard toward a stack of rusted shipping containers as the first shots came, deafening in the enclosed space, one round close enough to punch a hole through the container beside his head and spray him with rust and paint chips. He got behind the container, breath tearing, heart slamming, and heard boots fanning out across the concrete, unhurried, professional, men who knew they had him boxed and weren't in any rush about closing the box. A second round found him before he'd finished planning his next move. A line of fire tearing along his ribs that dropped him to one knee with a sound punched out of him that wasn't quite a scream. He clamped a hand over it, felt hot blood slicking between his fingers, and forced himself back up because staying down here meant staying down forever. He found a gap between containers, squeezed through it into a narrower alley of stacked pallets and rusted equipment, and kept moving, dragging one hand along the wall for balance, the world starting to gray at the edges from blood loss or panic or both. A man rounded the corner ahead of him too fast, gun already coming up, and Cole didn't think, just swung the length of rusted pipe he'd grabbed off a pallet without remembering picking it up, connecting with the man's forearm, hard enough to send the gun clattering away into the dark. He didn't stop to finish it. He kept moving, found a gap in the container wall where the corrugated metal had rusted through, and forced himself sideways through it into the humid dark outside, palmetto scrub scraping at his arms as he half ran, half staggered back toward the fence line and the SUV waiting beyond it. Shouts behind him closing, then fading as the scrub swallowed the sound. He didn't look back to see how close they'd come. He didn't have the strength to spare for it. He made it to the SUV on legs that barely wanted to hold him, fell into the driver's seat, and sat there a long moment with the engine off, one hand pressed hard against his side, blood soaking warm through his shirt and into the seat beneath him. His hands shook too badly to find the key on the first try, or the second. Baker hadn't been there. Had never been there. Sully had sold him a location built to look real enough to walk into, and Cole had walked into it anyway, too tired and too worried, and too far past his own limits to ask the one question that would have saved him the bullet now burning along his ribs. He got the key into the ignition on the third try, started the engine, and pulled out onto the coast road going nowhere in particular, just away, blood dripping steady onto the floor mat, and the horizon ahead of him blurring in and out of focus every time he blinked too long. Chapter 9. The motel Cole found was the kind that didn't ask questions, cash only, a hand-painted vacancy sign and a clerk who took one look at the blood soaked through his shirt and named a price $20 higher than what was posted without either of them acknowledging why. He didn't argue. He paid, took the key, and locked the door of room 11 behind him before he let himself sit down on the closed toilet lid and actually look at the damage. The bullet had creased him, not punched through. A furrow of torn skin and muscle along his lower ribs, 4 inches long, still bleeding steady but not the dark, thick bleeding that meant something vital had been hit. He'd seen worse on other men. He'd never quite gotten used to seeing it on himself. The gas station down the road had sold him gauze, butterfly closures, a bottle of the cheapest vodka on the shelf, and a sewing kit meant for mending jeans, and none of it was what a hospital would have used, but a hospital meant a report, and a report meant Voss finding out exactly how badly the night had gone. And Cole wasn't ready to hand that particular piece of leverage to a man he no longer trusted. He stripped off the ruined shirt, ran the wound under the sink tap until the water ran pink instead of red, and poured the vodka over it in one long, unbroken breath that turned into a word he didn't often use out loud. His hands were steadier than they had any right to be. Old training, mostly. The body remembering what to do even when the mind wanted to shut down and stay shut. He threaded the needle by lamplight, watched his own hand in the bathroom mirror, and put in 6 stitches evenly spaced, not pretty but sound. He'd done worse work on himself with less light. He taped a pad over it when he finished, wrapped a length of gauze around his ribs tight enough to hold everything in place, and sat there another minute with his back against the cool tile, letting the adrenaline finally fully drain out of him. It left something behind that felt a lot like shame. He lay on top of the bedspread afterward, not sleeping, staring at a water stain on the ceiling shaped roughly like Florida, and made himself walk back through the last 6 hours the way he should have walked through them before he ever crossed that fence line. Sully had answered too fast. That was the first thing that should have stopped him. A source he hadn't used in 2 years, cold, called out of nowhere, coming back in 40 minutes with an address, a body under a tarp, a detail specific enough to sound true and vague enough to never be checked. Cole had wanted it to be true so badly that he'd stopped doing the thing that had kept him alive for 15 years, which was assuming everyone was lying until they proved otherwise. He thought about Baker's face on the water, hollow-eyed, terrified, asking "Who are you?" in a voice that had nothing left to spend on hope. He thought about the skiff going under. No sign of a body, no confirmation either way. A man could tell himself Baker had made it to shore somewhere, swum clear, was hiding in some fisherman's shed right now nursing his own wounds and waiting for the noise to die down. A man could also be lying to himself, and Cole had spent enough of his life around men who lied to themselves to know the shape of it from the inside. He got up, found a legal pad in the nightstand drawer with a diner's logo on it, half its pages already gone, and started writing down everything he actually knew instead of everything he wanted to be true. Baker took Argus test data, showing a targeting flaw. Tried to go through channels, got shut down. Ran with copies rather than sell them, wanted this exposed, not profited from. Sorrell's crew, hired muscle, not law enforcement, operating with real resources. Working for somebody paying well enough to field 4+ men and at least 2 boats. Voss works for Sable Group. Sable's retainer traces to Halbrook Internal Security, signed off by initials GC. Voss knew Sorrell's name before I told him. Voss cares more about containment than retrieval. Somebody hacked Milo's system within a minute of him pulling Argus files. Means somebody's watching more than just Baker. Possibly watching me. Sully sold me a location that turned out to be bait. Question: did Sully know it was bait, or did somebody feed him the same bad information they wanted fed to me? Either way, can't use him again without knowing which. He stared at the last line a long moment, tapping the pen against the pad, and circled the word "watching" twice hard enough to tear through the paper. If somebody had been listening in on his call to Milo, and somebody had been ready and waiting at Coast View inside of an hour of his call to Sully, that wasn't 2 separate leaks. That was a pattern, and patterns had a source, and the source was either close to Voss or close enough to Cole himself that it didn't much matter which. He thought about the phone Voss had given him back at the diner, the burner meant for check-ins, sitting dead now at the bottom of the Gulf, along with everything else the saltwater had claimed. That, at least, was one leash cut clean, whether he'd meant to cut it or not. He didn't sleep so much as lose time in pieces, waking every hour or so to the pull of the stitches or the ache settling deep into muscles that had spent the last 2 days being asked to do more than muscles his age were built for. Around 4 in the morning, he gave up trying and sat up against the headboard, working through what came next with a clarity that only ever showed up for him in the wreckage after something had gone wrong. He needed a new source, one nobody knew he had, which meant not calling anyone in his usual circle for a while, not Milo, wherever Milo had gone to ground, and not anyone Sully might have talked to either willingly or otherwise. He needed to know exactly who GC was, and exactly what Sable Group's real relationship to Halbrook looked like underneath the retainer paperwork. And he needed, more than anything, to find out whether Marcus Baker had survived the water, because every plan he could build from here depended entirely on whether he was chasing a living man or chasing a ghost for a payday he no longer entirely believed in. He thought about Choate's face, saying he didn't do anything wrong, not really, and about the test data glowing on Milo's screen, numbers standing in for people who'd never know how close a boardroom decision had come to getting them killed. Whatever this job had started as, it wasn't that anymore, and some part of him, the part that had taken the job in a diner over black coffee, simple, clean, a name and a location and a fee, understood that he'd crossed some line back at Coastview that didn't have a way back across it. By the time gray light started working its way through the curtains, he'd filled 2 more pages of the legal pad, torn most of them up again, and settled on the only plan that made any sense: find Baker's family, whatever was left of it, because a scared man running for his life doesn't run to a stranger twice. He runs to blood. He got up, tested his ribs against a slow twist that made him hiss through his teeth, and started pulling on a clean shirt he'd bought along with the gauze, moving like a man who intended to keep moving whether his body agreed with the decision or not. Chapter 10. The burner Cole bought at a truck stop outside Cutter's Bite came in a plastic clamshell that took him longer to open than the drive had taken, $20 and a phone card taped to the box, the kind of thing drug dealers and cheating spouses bought by the dozen. He sat in the SUV in the parking lot, ribs aching every time he leaned forward, and dialed a number he'd gotten off a business card 2 days and a lifetime ago. It rang 3 times before Pruitt picked up, and her voice had ice in it before he'd said a word. "This better be good. Deputy Pruitt." "Walker." She said his name like she was spitting out something bitter. "You want to explain to me why I got called out to the last chance yesterday for a disturbance that left 2 men needing an ambulance, one of them with a wrist bent the wrong direction, and a bar owner who suddenly can't remember a single detail about what happened in his own establishment?" "I wasn't there." "Don't. Flat, immediate, no room in it. I've got a description from a witness that matches your SUV down to the plate. I've got a bar owner covering for somebody so hard he practically sprained something doing it. And I've got a very strong feeling that whatever's going on with your missing insurance claim isn't about insurance." Cole let a silence sit a second, weighing how much to give her. "You're right. It's not." "Well, there's a start." Some of the ice thawed, replaced by something more tired than angry. "You want to tell me what it actually is, or am I supposed to keep finding out one crime scene at a time?" "I need your help with something, and in exchange I'll tell you more than you probably want to know." "That an offer or a threat?" "Depends how much you like sleeping at night." That got something close to a laugh out of her, short and humorless. "Fine. There's a diner in Alvarez, 20 minutes off your position if you're still parked where I think you're parked. I'm off shift in an hour. You buy the coffee, you talk first, and if I don't like what I hear, I'm still a deputy sheriff, and you're still a person of interest in an assault case." "Fair enough." "It better be," she said, and hung up before he could say anything else. The diner in Alvarez was smaller than Ruthie's had been, a counter and 4 booths, a waitress who knew Pruitt by name, and brought her coffee without asking. Pruitt slid into the booth across from Cole in street clothes, off duty, and studied him a long moment before she said anything. "You look like hell." "I've heard that a lot this week." "I bet you have." Her eyes went to the way he was sitting, careful, one arm angled to keep pressure off his side. "You want to tell me what happened to your ribs, or is that part of the stuff I don't want to know?" "Somebody shot at me. It creased me. I'm fine." "You're fine." She said it flat, not quite believing it, and let it go anyway, which Cole appreciated more than he said. "Okay. Talk." He gave her the shape of it, more than he'd given Voss, and less than the whole truth. A stolen defense program with a buried flaw that could get people killed. A man named Baker who'd run rather than stay quiet about it. A crew led by somebody named Sorrell who wanted him back dead or close enough not to matter. And a client of Cole's own who was looking less and less like somebody actually trying to help. Pruitt listened without interrupting, coffee going cold in front of her the way it seemed to for everybody Cole talked business with lately. And when he finished, she sat back against the booth and exhaled slow. "That's a lot bigger than an insurance claim." "Yeah. And you want what from me, exactly?" "2 things." Cole kept his voice level. "I need to find Baker's family, cousins, whatever's left after his father died. And I need to know who else is circling this besides Sorrell's crew, because I think there's a buyer at the end of this chain, and I think finding him tells me who's actually paying for all of it." Pruitt was quiet a moment, turning her cup in a slow circle on the table. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded printout, slid it across without ceremony. "I ran the 2 guys from the bar fight through the system this morning, off the books, before my sergeant could ask why I was interested in a case that's technically not mine anymore." She tapped the page. "Both of them came back with priors, assault, 1 weapons charge that got pled down. Both of them also came back employed, on paper anyway, by a logistics outfit called Amsel Maritime Export, out of Corpus. Shipping company, mostly legitimate looking, moves containers in and out of the Gulf ports. Mostly. There's a federal flag on the parent company from about 3 years back. Commerce Department inquiry into restricted tech exports. Nothing that ever went to charges, but the file's still open, which in my experience means somebody couldn't prove it, not that it didn't happen. She tapped the name again. Companies run by a man named Victor Amsel. Foreign national, permanent residency, spends more time on paper traveling for business than most people spend traveling for anything. That's my buyer. Maybe. There's more. She pulled a second sheet out, this one denser, a list of phone numbers and timestamps. Both men had a burner in their pockets when the ambulance took them in. Standard evidence intake. I had a friend in processing pull the call logs before anybody official thought to ask why. Both phones show repeated contact with a number saved as Sorrel, no surprise there. But one of them also shows 3 calls in the last 5 days to a number that traces to a corporate satellite account registered to Amsel Maritime directly. Not a cutout. Not a burner. The actual company line. Cole felt something settle cold in his chest, the shape of it becoming clear before she said the last part out loud. And here's the part one figured you'd want most, Pruitt said, watching his face. Same phone's got 2 calls 4 days back to a third number. I ran that one too. It's not registered to anybody. Prepaid, activated 2 weeks ago. Used maybe a dozen times total, mostly to numbers that dead-end the same way this one does. But the tower pings on those 2 calls put the phone within a half-mile of a diner off Route 12. Cole didn't need her to say the name of the diner. He'd been sitting in a booth there himself 4 days ago, across from a man in a gray suit who'd called himself Voss. He's talking to them, Cole said, mostly to himself. Somebody using that number is talking to somebody at Amsel Maritime. Days before you ever walked into that diner, far as I can tell. Pruitt spread her hands. I can't prove it's your client. I can prove the timing's uncomfortable. Cole sat with that, the coffee gone cold in front of him too now, the shape of the whole job rearranging itself in his head. Voss hadn't just been managing him. Voss had been talking to the other side before the job even started, which meant either Voss was playing both ends against each other for reasons Cole couldn't yet see, or the retrieval job had never been the real objective at all. The family, he said, because it was the only piece of ground still solid enough to stand on. You said you'd look. Already did. Pruitt slid a third piece of paper across, an address written in her own hand rather than printed, like she hadn't wanted it in any system that could be pulled later. Cousin on his mother's side. Denny Baker lives out past Sabine, works construction when there's construction to work. Property records put him at this address, going back 9 years. If Marcus is looking for family that isn't dead or estranged, that's who's left. Cole folded the paper into his jacket. I owe you. You owe me a lot more than that, but we'll start there. Pruitt's eyes flicked past his shoulder toward the window, and something in her expression changed, sharpened. Don't turn around fast. There's a car been sitting across the street since before I got here. Wasn't there when I came in 15 minutes before you. Cole didn't turn around fast. He caught the reflection instead, angled in the chrome napkin dispenser on the table. A dark sedan, engine running, a man in the driver's seat doing a poor job of pretending to read a newspaper. Yours or mine? Pruitt asked, voice dropping low. Don't know yet. Only one way to find out. Cole was already sliding out of the booth, moving toward the diner's rear hallway rather than the front door, and Pruitt was a half step behind him without needing to be told twice, hand drifting instinctively to her hip out of habit, even though she wasn't carrying off duty. They came out the back through a delivery door into an alley behind the diner, and Cole heard the sedan's engine rev somewhere out front, tires chirping against asphalt as it swung around toward the alley mouth to cut them off. This way. Cole grabbed Pruitt's arm and pulled her the other direction, past a dumpster and through a gap in a wooden fence into the lot of the hardware store next door, putting a building between them and the alley before the sedan could finish its turn. They came out onto the next street over at a dead run, Cole's ribs screaming with every stride, and made it to Pruitt's truck 2 blocks down before the sedan reappeared at the corner behind them, slowing, clearly searching. "Get in," Pruitt said, already fishing for her keys. "Before whoever that is figures out we're not still standing in an alley." Cole climbed in, breath ragged, one hand pressed hard against the ache flaring along his stitched ribs, and watched through the side mirror as the sedan crawled past the intersection behind them without ever slowing down enough to be sure. "Friends of yours?" Pruitt asked, pulling out in the opposite direction, calm in a way that told Cole this wasn't her first time driving away from something she didn't want to explain to dispatch. "Not anymore," Cole said, and meant it in more ways than one. Chapter 11. Pruitt dropped him 2 streets over from where he'd left his SUV, engine idling at the curb while Cole sat a moment before opening the door. "That sedan," he said. "You going to report it?" "Report it as what?" "A car that might have been following a man who isn't technically my case anymore, driven by someone I never got a plate off." She shook her head, tired around the eyes in a way that hadn't been there an hour ago. "I'll keep my eyes open. That's the most I can promise you, Walker. And honestly, it's more than I should be promising at all." "I know. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me if this doesn't end with me explaining to my sergeant why I've been running plates for a man with an open assault complaint against him." She looked at him a second longer, something almost gentle underneath the exhaustion. "Go find your cousin. Be careful doing it." Cole climbed out, watched her pull away, and walked the 2 blocks to his own vehicle with his hand pressed light against his ribs the whole way, feeling every step of it. Sabine wasn't a town so much as a scattering of houses along a county road that had given up on being paved somewhere back around the state line, red dirt showing through in long ruts where the asphalt had crumbled away. Denny Baker's place sat at the end of a gravel drive behind a stand of loblolly pine, a single-story house with a tin roof gone rust orange, a work truck parked crooked in the yard, chickens scratching in the dirt near a co-op that had seen better decades. Cole parked at the mouth of the drive rather than pulling all the way in, cut the engine, and sat a moment reading the place the way he'd read the airstrip, the motel, every scene that had come before it. Curtains twitched in a front window before he'd even gotten the door open. Somebody inside already knew he was there. He walked up the drive with his hands visible, slow, easy, the way a man walks when he wants everyone watching to understand he isn't a threat. The front door opened before he reached the porch steps, and a big man filled the frame, thick through the shoulders, a week of stubble, a hunting rifle held low but ready across his body in a grip that said he knew exactly how to use it. "That's far enough." Cole stopped. "You're Denny." "Who's asking?" "Somebody looking for Marcus. Not to hurt him. Everybody who comes around here says that." Denny's finger found the trigger guard, didn't go inside it, but the message was clear enough. "I got a rifle and a property line, and you're about 6 feet past where I'd like you to be standing." "I was on a boat with him 3 nights ago," Cole said, keeping his voice level, no sudden movement in it. "Skiff went down off the coast near Cutter's Bight. I pulled him partway before it capsized. I don't know if he made it to shore on his own or if somebody found him, but if he's inside that house, he already knows exactly who I am, because I'm the only person who talked to him out on that water who wasn't trying to kill him." Something shifted behind Denny's eyes, not trust exactly, but a crack in the certainty. He half turned his head toward the house without ever taking his eyes fully off Cole. "Marcus." A long silence. Then a voice from somewhere inside, rough, exhausted. "What's he look like?" "Beat to hell. Cut on his forehead. Sound like the same guy." Another pause, longer. Then footsteps, and Marcus Baker appeared in the doorway behind his cousin, a second rifle held in hands that weren't nearly as steady as Denny's, the barrel wandering a few degrees off-center with every shallow breath he took. "You're really him," Baker said. "From the boat." "I'm really him," How do I know that? How do I know you're not just somebody who heard the stories secondhand? You asked me who I was, and I told you I wasn't one of them. You didn't slow the boat down. I had to jump for it. Cole kept his hands loose at his sides, aware of two rifles now aimed generally in his direction, one shaking, one not. You've got blood dried along your left temple that's been there since before we met, which means you never got it looked at properly. You're favoring your right side climbing off that porch step just now, same as I am, which tells me the water wasn't kind to either one of us. Baker's rifle dipped just slightly, the fight going out of his arms. The men who chased us. Are they? I don't know if they're dead. I know their boat caught fire. I know I didn't see you again after the capsize until about 10 seconds ago. Cole let that sit. I've been trying to find out if you were alive for 3 days, Marcus. That's the whole reason I'm standing in your cousin's front yard with 2 rifles pointed at me, instead of doing something smarter with my afternoon. Denny looked between the two of them, reading something in the exchange that seemed to settle whatever calculation he'd been running. He lowered the rifle first, slow, deliberate. Marcus. Your call. Baker looked at Cole a long moment, the barrel of his own rifle finally dropping toward the ground. Okay, he said, voice cracking on the word. Okay. Come inside before somebody driving by sees 3 grown men standing in a yard, pointing guns at each other. The house smelled like coffee and gun oil, a wood stove in the corner unlit this time of year but clearly used hard come winter. Baker sat at a kitchen table with a mug he wasn't drinking from, hands wrapped around it more for something to hold than for warmth, and told Cole the rest of it in pieces, stopping twice to compose himself, once to actually cry, which he seemed embarrassed about, and Cole didn't remark on. He'd swum for almost an hour after the skiff went under, found a channel marker to cling to, until his strength came back enough to make the last stretch to shore, and walked 11 miles inland before he found a payphone that still worked, and enough coins in his pocket to call the only family he had left who might not slam the door on him. I found the flaw 8 months ago, Baker said, staring at the table rather than at Cole. Routine stress testing, nothing glamorous, just running Argus through scenario after scenario the way I'd run 100 programs before it. And then I ran the crowded environment simulations, and it kept getting it wrong. Not every time. Just enough times that if you ran the math on actual deployment numbers, actual operational tempo, you were talking about people dying who shouldn't have been on any target list at all. You reported it. I reported it. Baker's laugh had no humor in it at all. Wrote it up clean, followed the process, sent it to my supervisor, who sent it up the chain, and 3 weeks later, I got called into a meeting where a man I'd never met before told me the finding was noted and under review, and that in the meantime I should focus on my actual assignments. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Under review meant nothing. I checked 6 weeks later. The file hadn't been touched. And then I found out they'd signed a deployment contract anyway. Accelerated the timeline instead of slowing it down, and I understood that under review had never meant anything except go away. So you copied it. I copied everything. The test data, the internal memos, the contract summary, all of it. I wasn't going to sell it, no matter what anybody's telling you I was planning. I was going to take it to a journalist, somebody who'd actually run the story instead of burying it. And I was 3 days from doing exactly that when somebody tipped off security that I'd accessed files outside my clearance, and I had about 10 minutes to decide whether to stay and explain myself to men who don't explain things back. You ran. I ran. Baker wrapped both hands tighter around the cold coffee. And I've been running since, and I don't even have most of it anymore. I lost the drive somewhere in that water, or it's sitting at the bottom of the Gulf, which honestly might be the safest place for it at this point. He looked up, something desperate coming into his face for the first time since Cole had walked in. But I've still got one copy. Small drive, waterproofed case. I never let it out of arm's reach even in that water. And I need you to understand something before you decide whatever you're going to decide about me. I'm listening. If you hand me back to Halbrook, along with that drive, it disappears. Both of us disappear, probably, one way or another, and the story dies with us. Nobody ever finds out Argus has a flaw that gets innocent people killed, and the company just keeps going. Keeps selling it. Keeps deploying it. Baker's voice broke on the last word. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you not to be the last domino. Cole sat with that a long moment, the wood stove ticking as it cooled. Denny standing near the window with his rifle propped against the wall now, but his eyes still on the driveway out of old habit. I'm not promising you anything, Cole said finally. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with what you just told me. But I didn't come here to hand you back to anybody. And I'm not planning on leaving either. Not until I understand exactly who's still hunting you and why. Baker's shoulders sagged, something between relief and exhaustion. That's more than anybody's given me in a week. Denny's head came up sharp from the window, one hand already reaching back for the rifle propped against the wall. Truck, he said. Coming up the county road, slow. Don't recognize it. Chapter 12. The truck's headlights swept the tree line once and went dark, engine still running somewhere past the pines. And that told Cole everything he needed to know about who was in it. Kill the lights, he said, already moving toward the kitchen window. All of them. Now. Denny didn't argue. He hit the switch by the door, and the house went black except for the last orange coals in the wood stove, and Baker's breathing turned ragged in the dark behind them. How many? Denny asked, rifle up, eyes on the yard. Don't know yet. More than one vehicle, from the sound of it. Cole eased the window open an inch, cool night air sliding in over the smell of gun oil and cold coffee. You know this property. Where's the ground favor you? Barn's got a good line on the drive. Chicken coop's dead space, don't bother with it. Denny's voice had gone flat and businesslike, a different man than the one who'd greeted Cole with a rifle that afternoon. Marcus. Bedroom, get low, stay away from the windows. Baker didn't move at first, rifle still clutched in both hands like it might protect him just by existing. Marcus. Cole kept his voice even. You're not going to help us by standing in the kitchen. Get low. That got him moving, stumbling back down the hall, and Cole heard a door close soft behind him. A second engine joined the first out past the trees, then a third, and headlights swept the drive again, closer now, 3 sets crawling forward at walking pace with the particular patience of men who weren't worried about being seen because they already knew exactly where they were going. They stopped 40 yards short of the house, engines idling, and Cole counted shapes peeling off from the vehicles into the dark, 6, maybe 7, more than Sorrel had fielded at the airstrip or the warehouse both. A voice carried across the yard through a bullhorn, or just a set of good lungs, calm, almost conversational. Marcus Baker. Mr. Walker. This doesn't need to get complicated. Cole knew the voice before Denny leaned close and whispered it anyway. That's not one of the 2 from the bar. No, Cole said. That's Sorrel. A shape separated from the others, unhurried, hands visible, walking the way a man walks when he genuinely believes the ground already belongs to him. Mid-40s, built lean rather than heavy, moving with the particular economy Cole recognized because he'd trained the same way once, a long time ago, under people who didn't exist on paper. I know you're in there, Walker, Sorrel called, still coming, still calm. I've read your file. Contractor work, mostly recovery jobs, a couple of things that reads like they should have been in a different line of work entirely. I respect the work. I do. Which is why I'd rather this end with everybody driving home instead of somebody bleeding out in a chicken yard. Come a little closer and we'll talk about it, Cole called back. Sorrel laughed, short and genuine. I've got 7 men, and you've got a rifle and a cousin. I'm not walking into that trade. Then we're at an impasse. We're really not. Something changed in Sorrel's voice, all the warmth going out of it at once. Last chance. Send Baker out, the drive with him, and everybody else gets to keep breathing tonight. The silence afterward lasted 3 full seconds before the night tore open. The first burst came from somewhere left of the drive, Rounds stitching across the front of the house in a stuttering line that blew out the kitchen window above Cole's head and sent glass raining down across the sink. He dropped below the sill on instinct, heart slamming, and heard Denny's rifle answer from the bedroom window, one shot, deliberate, followed by a shout of pain out in the dark that meant it had found something. "Barn," Denny called. "They're using the barn for cover. I can't get an angle from here." Cole crossed the kitchen in a crouch, found the back door, and went out low into the yard's deep shadow along the house's east wall, working around toward an angle that would put the barn's corner between him and the men using it for cover. Muzzle flashes strobed across the dark ahead of him. 3, 4 positions he could count, rounds chewing splinters out of the porch rail behind him as somebody found his movement. He returned fire toward the nearest flash, more to buy space than to hit anything, and kept moving, boots silent in the soft dirt behind the co-op. A shape rose up from behind a fuel drum 10 feet ahead, weapon swinging toward him, and Cole closed the last of the distance before the man could bring it fully to bear, driving him back into the drum with a shoulder that rang metal loud enough to hurt his own ears, following it down with both hands locked on the weapon until it came free, and the fight went out of the man beneath him. More muzzle flashes lit the yard, closer now, and Cole rolled clear behind the coop as rounds punched through corrugated metal above his head, chickens screaming and scattering in every direction through the chaos. Back at the house, Denny's rifle spoke twice more steady, and Cole heard a second man go down somewhere near the barn with a cry that cut off hard. Whatever else Denny was, he'd grown up shooting on this land, and it showed in every round he sent. Cole came up behind the co-op with the taken weapon in hand now, unfamiliar in his grip but functional, and used it to lay down fire toward the barn corner while he closed the remaining distance to the house's back door. He made it inside as a fresh burst tore through the wall behind him, drywall dust filling the air, and found Denny reloading with hands that had gone from steady to shaking now that the adrenaline had fully arrived. "How many left?" Cole asked, breathing hard. "Lost count. 4, maybe 5. Denny slammed the bolt home. "They're not backing off. They're not going to. Sorrel doesn't strike me as a man who quits a job half finished." Cole checked the unfamiliar weapons magazine, found it half spent. "We can't hold this position. Too many angles, too few walls. Where the hell do you want us to go?" "Tree line, past the co-op. If we can get Marcus into the pines, we've got cover, and they've got open ground between here and there. Better odds than a house with windows on every side." Denny nodded once, hard, and turned toward the hallway to get Baker moving, and that was when a fresh burst raked across the front of the house at an angle nobody had accounted for, somebody having worked their way around to the drive side while the fight held everyone's attention on the barn. Denny went down in the hallway doorway, hard, all at once, the way a man goes down when his body stops answering before his mind understands why. "Denny?" Cole was across the kitchen in 2 strides, dropping beside him, hands finding the wound low on his side already soaking dark through his shirt. Denny's eyes found Cole's, wide, more surprised than afraid. "Get him out," Denny said, voice already thinning. "Marcus. Get him out, that's the whole thing, right? Get him out. You're not done yet, stay with me." "Cole." Denny's hand found his wrist, grip still strong for one more second before it wasn't. "Get him out." He was gone before Cole could answer. Gone the particular fast way that told Cole there'd been nothing more to do from the moment the round found him, and Cole knelt there one useless second longer than he could afford before Baker's scream from the hallway doorway dragged him back into motion. "No, no, Denny, no." Baker was on his knees beside his cousin's body, and there wasn't time, there was no time at all, rounds still chewing through the walls around them, and Cole grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up wobbly. "He's gone. You staying here means he's gone for nothing. Move." Whatever reached Baker in that sentence worked where nothing else might have. He came up off the floor, tears streaming, rifle forgotten on the ground behind him, and let Cole drag him toward the back door and out into the yard's broken dark. They ran for the coop, for the gap beyond it where the pines started, rounds tracking their movement in short chattering bursts that kicked up dirt on either side of them. Cole put himself half a step behind Baker, angling his own body toward the fire, and felt something tug hot and fast across his upper arm that he didn't have time to acknowledge as anything more than pressure until later. They hit the tree line together and kept running, branches whipping across Cole's face, Baker sobbing for breath beside him, the gunfire behind them growing sporadic and then stopping altogether as the darkness under the pines swallowed them whole. Somewhere far off, faint but real, a dog started barking at the sound of it all, and another sound rose beneath it, distant, thin. The first hint of a siren finally responding to gunfire that had been going on for 3 full minutes in a county that didn't get much of anything happening at all. Cole didn't slow down to listen for it. He kept one hand locked on Baker's arm and kept moving deeper into the trees, putting distance between them and a house that had a dead man in its hallway, and Dade Sorrell's men still standing somewhere in the yard behind them, regrouping, deciding whether the night was worth finishing after all. Chapter 13. They stopped a quarter-mile into the pines, deep enough that the flashlight beams sweeping the yard behind them had gone to nothing more than pale flickers through the trunks, and Baker sat down hard against a pine like his legs had simply stopped agreeing to hold him up. He didn't say anything for a long time. Cole let him have it, using the silence to pull his shirt sleeve back and look at the damage along his upper arm, a graze, ugly but shallow, already clotting on its own. He tore a strip from the shirt's hem and wrapped it one-handed, teeth gritted, and didn't say anything either. Somewhere back through the trees, red and blue light started strobing off the underside of the low clouds, faint but growing, and the first siren Cole had heard climbing the county road 20 minutes back was joined now by a second. "That's for Denny," Baker said finally, voice raw. "They're coming for Denny, and he's all ready?" He stopped himself, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "I know. You don't get to say that like it means anything. You've known him one afternoon. I've known him my whole life." Baker's voice cracked, anger finding somewhere to land because grief hadn't given it anywhere else to go. He didn't have anything to do with Argus or Halbrook or any of it. He just let his cousin sleep on his couch. Cole didn't argue with any of that, because none of it was wrong. He finished the wrap on his arm and looked back through the trees toward the lights. "We're not staying here to explain that to a deputy," he said. "Whatever comes next, it doesn't happen with both of us sitting in a county interview room while Sorrell's crew figures out their next move unwatched." Baker wiped his face with the back of one hand, some of the anger draining into exhaustion. "So what, we just leave him there? We leave him to people who'll do right by him. There's nothing either of us can do for Denny now, except make sure it wasn't for nothing." Cole stood, offered a hand down, and after a long moment Baker took it. Cole's SUV sat exactly where he'd left it, at the mouth of the drive, 40 yards from the worst of it, and the chaos of arriving units, 2 cruisers now, lights washing the yard in alternating color, radios crackling, gave them the one thing they needed most, which was every set of eyes on that property pointed somewhere other than at a dark vehicle parked at the tree line. They came at it low, through the ditch running alongside the drive, and Cole had the door open and the engine turning over before either of them had fully closed their own doors. He kept the headlights dark until they'd put a quarter mile between themselves and the flashing lights behind them, running by moon and instinct on a county road he'd only driven once, and didn't switch them on until the glow in his mirrors had faded to nothing. Baker sat with his knees pulled up, arms wrapped around them, staring out the window at nothing for the first 10 miles. Cole let him. It was Baker who finally broke it, somewhere past the county line, voice smaller than it had been but steadier. "You always this quiet, or is this a special occasion?" "Bit of both." "Great. Real comforting." Baker huffed something that wasn't quite a laugh. "You know, for a guy whose whole job seems to be finding people, you're not much for conversation." Didn't realize conversation was part of the job description. It should be. I've had a very bad week, and the least you could do is ask how I'm holding up. Baker's tone had an edge to it that wasn't really anger, more the sound of a man testing whether normal human behavior still worked at all after what he just watched happen in a kitchen doorway. For the record, I'm not great. In case you were wondering. Wasn't wondering. Figured it was obvious. See that right there? That's not a conversation. That's a man refusing to have one. Baker looked over at him, something almost like a smile trying to surface through the wreckage. How do you do this for a living? Genuinely. What's the interview process for becoming a guy who fistfights strangers in gravel parking lots? You don't apply. You get recruited, get trained, spend a few years doing worse things for the government than I've done for you this week. And then one day you decide you'd rather do it for yourself and pick your own jobs. That's a very short answer for what sounds like it should be a much longer story. It is a much longer story. You're not getting the long version. Fair. Baker was quiet a moment, watching the dark field slide past. I used to think my job was stressful. Modeling failure rates, running QA on systems that were supposed to make life or death decisions faster than a human could. Turns out, that's not actually the stressful part of my life. The stressful part of my life started about 4 days ago. You're adapting fast for a spreadsheet man. Is that a compliment? Close enough to one. Baker actually laughed at that, short and surprised, like the sound had caught him off guard as much as it caught Cole. It didn't last, but Cole noticed the shape it left behind, something loosening slightly in the set of Baker's shoulders that hadn't been there since the tree line. Can I ask you something serious? Go ahead. That drive. The one I've still got. Baker's hand went unconsciously to the small waterproof case still tucked inside his jacket, the last surviving piece of everything he'd taken. You keep saying you're not promising anything. But you also didn't take it from me back at Denny's, and you had plenty of chances. Why not? Cole drove a while before he answered, watching the white line unspool ahead of the headlights. Because I don't think you're the villain in this, he said finally. And because a man named Grant Corrigan signed off on burying test data that says people are going to die because of a deadline. I want to know a lot more about Grant Corrigan before I decide who I'm actually working for. The silence that followed had a different weight to it than the ones before. How do you know that name? I don't, not really. I've got 2 initials from a paper trail and a guess. Cole glanced over. You just confirmed the guess. Baker sat very still. Grant Corrigan runs Halbrook's internal security division. He's the one who called me into that meeting after I filed the report. He's the one who told me it was noted. His voice had gone tight, careful, like he was choosing each word with more precision than he'd used all night. He's not some corporate suit who doesn't understand what he's covering up, Cole. He understood exactly what the data meant, and he signed off on shipping it anyway. How senior is he? Senior enough that the CEO doesn't make a security decision without his sign-off. Senior enough that I never met anyone above him in that chain. Baker looked over, something sharper coming into his exhausted eyes. You think he's the one paying Sorrell? I think he's the one who hired the man who hired me. Cole said it flat, letting the shape of it settle in the car between them. Which means the client I've been reporting to for 4 days works for the same man who wants both of us dead badly enough to burn a house down to get it done. Baker let out a long breath, dragging both hands down his face. So what do we do with that? We find out how far up it goes, and we find a way to make sure it doesn't stay quiet whether I decide to trust you or not. Cole checked the mirror out of habit, found the road behind them empty, dark, no headlights yet. But first we need somewhere to stop that isn't a motel with a paper trail, because I'd guess Corrigan's got resources enough to be watching for both our names on any registry that exists. The radio, left on low since Cole had turned the ignition, crackled through a burst of static and settled into a local station's late-night broadcast, a tired-sounding announcer reading from a wire report between songs. Breaking news out of Sabine County tonight, where sheriff's deputies responded to reports of gunfire at a residence off County Road 14. One fatality confirmed on scene. Authorities are asking anyone with information on a dark-colored SUV seen leaving the area to contact. Cole reached over and killed the radio before the announcer finished the sentence, jaw tight, eyes back on the empty road ahead. Chapter 14. Cole pulled the SUV off the county road onto a cut-through that dead-ended at an old grain silo somebody had stopped using a generation back, killed the engine, and sat with his hands still on the wheel while the ticking of cooling metal filled the silence Baker had finally let settle over them. "We stopping?" Baker asked. "Stopping. Not staying." Cole looked out at the dark shape of the silo against a sky just starting to gray at the edges. "I need to think, and I can't do it doing 70 on a road with an APB out on this vehicle." Baker didn't argue. He curled into the passenger seat, exhaustion finally winning some argument he'd been having with himself for the last hour, and Cole let his eyes close inside of 5 minutes. Cole didn't sleep. He sat with the problem the way he'd learned to a long time ago, laying it out piece by piece instead of letting it crowd in all at once. Sorrell's crew had hit Denny's house inside 2 hours of Cole arriving there. Nobody knew that address existed outside of 3 people, Cole, Pruitt, and Denny himself, and Pruitt had written it by hand specifically so it would never touch a system that could be pulled or subpoenaed. Cole hadn't called Voss since the truck stop outside Corpus, hadn't mentioned Denny's name to anyone but Pruitt, hadn't so much as texted a soul about where he was headed. Which left exactly one explanation that fit every piece of it, and it was one he should have considered 3 days and 2 ambushes ago. He reached into the back seat, pulled his backpack into his lap, and dug past the folder to the bottom, where a small sealed envelope had been riding since a diner booth on the first morning of all this, untouched, unopened. Payment he'd never gotten around to collecting because the job had never once stopped moving long enough to finish. He turned it over in his hands under the dome light. Thicker than a stack of bills alone should have made it. A slight, uneven weight in one corner that didn't match the rest. He tore it open. Cash first, a few thousand in banded hundreds, and beneath that, sewn into a false lining stitched along the envelope's inner seam, a disc no bigger than a shirt button, matte black, a hairline seam running around its edge where it had been sealed shut. Cole sat looking at it a long moment, feeling something that wasn't quite surprise settle into a shape he'd already half expected. Baker stirred, blinked at the light. "What is that?" "A leash." Cole turned it over between 2 fingers. "Cellular GPS tracker, probably good for a couple weeks on a charge this size." Voss handed it to me himself, first morning, sitting right across the table. "You've been carrying a tracker this whole time." "Looks that way." Cole set it on the dash, staring at it like it might explain itself if he waited long enough. "Which means every place I've gone since that diner, every motel, every gas station, every dock, somebody's had a real-time map of it the whole way, whether Voss was the one watching it or somebody he answers to." Baker went very quiet. "Denny's house." "Denny's house," Cole said. "I didn't need to tell Sorrell where we were. I was carrying the address in my pocket the whole drive over." He dialed Voss from the burner, hands steady in a way that surprised him a little, given what was sitting behind the steadiness. It rang twice. "Mr. Walker." "I was starting to worry." "I bet you were. Real-time tracking makes for a lot of worrying, watching a man run from an ambush at an airstrip, a warehouse, and a house that just got somebody killed." The pause on the other end lasted a fraction too long to be nothing. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Sure you do. You handed me a payment envelope with a tracker sewn into the lining, Voss, or whatever your real name is, And I've been carrying your leash around for 4 days like an idiot, while you fed my location to Sorrel every time I stopped moving. Cole kept his voice level, cold rather than loud. So let's skip the part where you deny it, and get to the part where you tell me what the actual job was, because it clearly wasn't retrieving a corporate asset. Another silence, and when Voss spoke again, something had shifted in his voice. All the diner warmth burned away entirely. You're a competent man, Walker. I'll give you that. More competent than I expected, honestly, given how this was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go? You were supposed to find him fast. Faster than you did. Sorrel's people were meant to handle the rest cleanly, without you anywhere near it when it happened. You were a bloodhound, not a bodyguard. Somewhere in the last 4 days, you decided to be something else, and that's made this considerably messier than it needed to be. Say it plainly. What was Sorrel supposed to do to Baker, once I found him? You already know the answer to that, or you wouldn't have asked the question that way. Voss's voice had gone almost gentle, which was somehow worse than the coldness. There's no version of this where Marcus Baker gets to hold a press conference, Walker. The data he's carrying doesn't get contained by having a conversation with him. It gets contained by making sure it never leaves whatever pocket it's currently sitting in, and making sure he never has the opportunity to tell his story to anyone who matters. And Corrigan signed off on that. The silence this time had a different quality entirely, something closer to genuine surprise. That name isn't one you should have. I've got it anyway. Then you understand exactly how much bigger this is than a stolen data plan, and exactly how badly you've complicated your own position by refusing to finish the job you were paid for. A pause, calculation audible in it even over the phone. There's still a version of tonight where you walk away from this whole, Walker. Bring us Baker, and the drive, and whatever's happened up to this point gets treated as an unfortunate misunderstanding. I can make that offer once. I won't make it twice. You already know what I'm going to say to that. I had a feeling. I was hoping I was wrong. Something cold and final settled into Voss's voice. You should know we're not the only ones who can read a tracker's last known ping, Mr. Walker. Sorrel's already rolling toward your last confirmed position. I'd suggest you stop having this conversation and start driving. The line went dead. Cole sat with the phone still against his ear a second after the call ended, then set it down slow and looked at the little black disc on the dash like it had personally wronged him, which in a way it had. He knows where we are, Baker said, reading it off Cole's face. He knows where this tracker is. Not the same thing, not for much longer. Cole started the engine, pulled back onto the county road, and drove with one eye on the map glowing dim on the dash mount, hunting for the thing he needed. He found it 4 miles on, a 2-lane bridge crossing a wide, slow-moving river, guardrails rusted thin, no other cars in sight in either direction. He stopped in the middle of it, window down, engine idling, and held the tracker out over black water lit only by his own headlights reflecting off the current below. That's really it? Baker asked. You just throw it away. I throw it away. And every assumption Voss and Corrigan and Sorrel have been building for 4 days about how to find us goes with it. Cole turned the disc once between his fingers, feeling its weight, small and cheap and enormous all at once. From here on, I'm not finding you for anybody but myself. And I'm not planning on handing you back to people whose plan for you ends with a shovel. He let it go. It fell without sound he could hear over the current, a small splash lost somewhere below in the dark, gone. Cole rolled the window up, put the SUV back in gear, and drove off the bridge into a night that felt for the first time in 4 days like it might actually belong to him instead of to whoever had been watching him the whole way through it. Chapter 15. They made it 40 minutes before the first headlights fell in behind them, and held their distance in a way Cole had learned 4 days ago meant something. Don't look back, he said, eyes on the mirror instead of the road. Just tell me if you feel like you're going to be sick, because I need to know that before I start driving the way I'm about to start driving." "What's happening?" "Somebody found the tracker's last known position faster than I hoped they would." Cole eased off the gas rather than on it, testing, and watched the headlights behind them ease off to match a half-mile back patient professional. Which means either Voss is better at math than I gave him credit for, or he already had somebody rolling before I ever made that call. "You threw the tracker in a river." "I threw the tracker in a river 4 miles back. This is somebody who was already close before I did it, working off the last good ping instead of a live one." Cole checked the fuel gauge, did the math on it out of old habit, filed the number away. "Doesn't change what we do next. It just means we're not as far ahead as I'd hoped." The interstate opened up ahead of them a few miles on, and 18-wheeler's taillights, the only other traffic visible for a mile in either direction. Sodium lights strung along the shoulder every quarter mile like a string of dying stars. Cole took the entrance ramp for I-10 West, with the pursuing headlights a quarter mile back and closing, steady, unhurried, the kind of following that told him whoever was driving didn't need to rush because they already believed the outcome wasn't in question. He held the SUV at a speed that kept them in the flow of the little traffic there was, resisting the urge to run, because running told the car behind him everything it needed to know about how rattled he was, and rattled men made worse decisions than calm ones. He watched the mirror instead, counting the gap, watching it hold steady mile after mile. "They're not trying to catch us," Baker said, voice tight. "Are they?" "No. They're hurting us." Cole's hands tightened slow on the wheel. "Which means there's something up ahead I haven't seen yet, and they're happy to let me drive right into it." He started reading the road differently after that. Every overpass a possible choke point, every cluster of lights on the horizon a possible trap, and when the exit sign for a rest area came up a mile out, green and unremarkable, he made his decision before he'd fully finished thinking it through. Better to fight on ground he chose than ground that chose him at 70 miles an hour on an empty stretch of interstate with nothing around for cover but scrub brush and a drainage ditch. "Hold on," he said, and cut the wheel hard onto the exit ramp, tires protesting against the sudden angle, Baker's hand slamming flat against the dash to brace himself. "This is your plan?" "A truck stop. This is cover, traffic, and witnesses. All 3 things I'd rather have than open highway at 3 in the morning." Cole killed the headlights as he came into the lot. A scatter of sodium lamps over gravel half filled with idling rigs, engines rumbling low, running lights glowing red along a dozen trailers parked nose to tail. He swung wide behind the row of trucks and stopped in the deep shadow between 2 of them with the engines still running, low, ready. "Get down. Stay down until I tell you otherwise. And if anybody comes near this vehicle who isn't me, you get out the far side and you run for the building lights. Don't wait to see who it is." Baker didn't argue. He folded himself down into the footwell without another word, and Cole was already reaching for the door handle. The pursuing vehicle came off the ramp 30 seconds later, slower now, hunting, headlights dark, and Cole watched through the gap between trailers as it rolled the lot's outer edge with the patience of men who knew their target had gone to ground somewhere close and weren't in any hurry to flush it out wrong. 2 shapes were visible through the windshield, in the brief wash of a sodium lamp neither of them could quite avoid. One driving, one riding shotgun with something long and dark resting across his knees. Cole was out of the SUV and moving before he'd fully decided to, staying low along the trailer line, putting distance between himself and Baker's position while he still had the one advantage that mattered, which was that they were looking for a parked SUV and not for a man already circling behind them on foot. He came up on the vehicle from the rear quarter, moving between 2 idling rigs where the diesel roar swallowed the sound of his own footsteps, and watched it stop, engine ticking down to idle 40 feet from where his own vehicle sat hidden in shadow. The passenger door opened. A man stepped out, weapon low but ready, scanning the row of trailers with the unhurried thoroughness of someone getting paid by the hour rather than by results. Cole let him get close enough that closing the distance wouldn't take more than 2 strides, then closed it in one motion, forearm locking hard across the man's throat from behind before the weapon could come up, riding him down into the gravel with enough force to end the argument before it fully started. The weapon skittered loose across the ground. Cole came up with it in hand, unfamiliar weight, safety already off, and turned in time to see the driver already out of the car, already firing across the lot without waiting to confirm his partner was even still standing. The first round sparked off the trailer beside Cole's head, close enough that he felt the heat of it. He dropped to a knee, returned fire twice to force the man's aim down, and used the half-second it bought him to close half the distance in a hard, low run through the gap between 2 parked rigs. A trucker's voice bellowed something furious and confused from a cab nearby, and somewhere across the lot another rig's air horn blasted long and loud, a sound that did more to rattle the shooter's nerve than any of Cole's return fire had managed. Lights were coming on now, in cab after cab, faces appearing in windows, and the driver's eyes went from Cole to the gathering audience and back, calculation happening fast behind them. He broke for the car, instead of holding his position, sprinting hard, and Cole let him go rather than chase him into open ground lit by a dozen headlights, and however many now wide-awake witnesses were watching the whole thing unfold with their phones already coming up to film it. The man behind him, the one Cole had put in the gravel, was starting to stir, groaning, and Cole left him there too, no time and no inclination to finish what didn't need finishing. The vehicle peeled out of the lot fast, fishtailing hard on loose gravel before finding pavement, taillights shrinking up the on-ramp and gone into the dark. Cole stood a moment in the wreckage of noise and diesel exhaust and adrenaline, chest heaving, weapon still warm in his hand, and became aware all at once of a dozen truckers watching him from their cabs with the particular stillness of men deciding whether to get involved or mind their own business. He tucked the weapon into his waistband, walked back to the SUV at a pace that tried hard to look unhurried, and climbed in. He found Baker exactly where he'd left him, curled low in the passenger footwell, both hands over his head, shaking. "They're gone?" "For now." Cole pulled back out of the shadow between the trailers, easing past the rows of parked rigs and the truckers still watching from their windows, and merged back onto the interstate before anybody decided the story was interesting enough to flag down a highway patrol about. His hands had started shaking too, now that there was nothing left that needed them steady. "Sit up. We're not stopping again for a while." Baker climbed back into the seat proper, pale, and noticed the weapon tucked at Cole's hip before Cole had a chance to set it aside. "Where'd that come from?" "Borrowed it." Cole pulled it free at the next straight stretch of road and held it out one-handed, angling it so the dash light caught a small logo stamped into the grip, a stylized wave curling over a compass rose. "Look familiar?" Baker's face went pale, in a different way this time. "That's an Amcel Maritime logo. Their security division puts it on everything. Vehicles, uniforms, gear. I've seen it on shipping manifests that came through our procurement office." So Sorrell's not just working for Amcel anymore. His people are wearing Amcel's gear, driving what's probably an Amcel-registered vehicle. Cole set the weapon on the console between them, thinking it through out loud as much as explaining it. Which means Corrigan didn't just hire outside muscle to clean up a mess. He handed the whole operation to Amcel's people directly. That's not a man protecting stolen corporate property anymore. That's 2 men running the same play from opposite sides of a deal. Why would Halbrook's own security chief be working hand in glove with the guy trying to buy the exact thing he's supposedly trying to protect? Cole merged into the thin gray traffic starting to build with the coming daylight, turning the question over with the same careful attention he'd have given a lock he couldn't quite pick yet. "Because maybe protecting it was never actually the goal," he said slowly. "Maybe Corrigan doesn't care if Argus ends up in Amcel's hands overseas, so long as it disappears from Halbrook's side of the ledger clean. No scandal, no whistleblower, no congressional inquiry, Nothing that costs the company its next contract. Just a quiet write-off on this end. And somewhere down the line, a very large payment that never has to show up on anybody's balance sheet. Baker sat with that a long moment, watching the gray light spreading along the horizon, chewing on it the way Cole imagined he'd once chewed on a spreadsheet that didn't balance. He's not covering up a mistake. He's selling it. Looks that way to me. So what do we do with that? Baker's voice had steadied some, exhaustion giving way to something closer to focus. We can't exactly walk it into a police station. Half of what we'd be saying sounds like something out of a movie, and the other half is built on a hunch and some phone records a deputy pulled off the books. Which is exactly why a hunch isn't going to be enough. Cole checked the fuel gauge again, did the math on how far they could get before they needed to stop somewhere that came with real risk, and didn't love any of the numbers. If Corrigan's already mid-negotiation with Amcel, waiting around for the right journalist to pick up your drive isn't fast enough. We need something that ties the two of them together directly. A contract, a wire transfer, an email, anything that isn't deniable. Something Corrigan kept close enough that even Sable Group and Amcel's people wouldn't have it. How do we get that? Cole didn't answer right away. He was thinking about a name Milo had given him days ago, in a kitchen full of dying monitors, about a billing record signed off by initials that had turned out to belong to exactly the man they were now circling, and about the fact that somewhere inside Halbrook's own building, behind whatever locks a man like Corrigan trusted to keep his business private, there was almost certainly a paper trail nobody outside his own office had ever laid eyes on. We get it from the source, he said finally. Which means before this is over, I'm going to need to walk into Halbrook's building myself. Baker turned to look at him like he'd suggested something genuinely insane, which, given the last 5 days, was probably a fair assessment to make. You're joking. I don't joke much anymore, Cole said, and kept driving west into a sky just beginning to lighten at the edges, the weight of the borrowed weapon still sitting warm against his hip. Chapter 16. We can't keep driving this vehicle, Cole said, somewhere past a water tower that announced a town called Marrow in letters faded to the color of rust. Every trucker at that rest stop got a good look at it, and by now somebody's called it in, describing more than just a dark SUV on a wire report. So what, we steal a car. We buy one. Quietly. Cole took the exit from Marrow, a town small enough that its whole downtown fit in a single stoplight cycle. There's always somebody selling something for cash, and no questions if you know where to look. Where to look turned out to be a salvage yard on the edge of town, chain-link fence sagging under a hand-painted sign reading Tate's, "We buy, we sell, we don't ask," half hidden behind a wall of stacked, rusted hulks. A man old enough to have sold cars to Cole's grandfather came out wiping his hands on a rag, and named a price for a decade-old pickup with Louisiana plates that Cole didn't bother negotiating down. They were mid-transfer, Cole counting bills into the old man's palm, when a county cruiser rolled slow past the front gate, brake lights flaring as it passed the lot. "Down," Cole said low, and Baker folded himself behind the pickup's open door without needing to be told twice. The cruiser idled a beat too long at the gate before easing on, and Cole let his breath out slow, watching it shrink in the rear view of a truck that wasn't his yet. "Friend of yours?" the old man asked, not looking up from counting his own cut of the bills. "Not particularly." "Didn't figure." He handed over a set of keys and a bill of sale with a name on it that wasn't Cole's or anyone's, filled out for a transaction that would take the county clerk's office a month to process, if it ever did. "Y'all have a good one." They left the SUV parked behind a row of gutted trucks that hadn't moved in years and probably never would, and Cole pulled the pickup out onto the county road with the sun fully up now, throwing long shadows across cracked asphalt. The extended stay motel Cole found on the far side of Marrow took cash without a second glance, a row of single rooms behind a laundromat that had gone out of business sometime in the last decade. He paid for 3 nights, more than he expected to need, and locked the door of room 4 behind them with a bone-deep tiredness that no amount of adrenaline seemed able to touch anymore. He peeled back the gauze on his ribs in the bathroom mirror, found the stitches holding but the skin around them an ugly swollen red that worried him more than he let it show, and cleaned it again with what was left of the motel's tiny bar of soap and a washcloth gone thin from use. The graze along his arm had scabbed over clean enough to leave alone. Baker sat on the edge of the bed when Cole came back out, staring at nothing, the small waterproof case still gripped in one hand like it had grown there. "You should sleep," Cole said. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that hallway." Baker's voice had gone flat, hollowed out. "Does that stop?" "Eventually." Cole considered lying to him, decided against it. "Not entirely. It gets quieter. That's the best I can offer you." Baker nodded like that was somehow both worse and more honest than anything else anyone had told him all week. Cole made the call from the motel's payphone out by the ice machine, a number Milo had given him years ago for exactly this kind of emergency, a relay that would bounce 3 times before it ever reached wherever Milo had actually gone to ground. It rang a long time before anyone picked up. "You're either very brave or very stupid using this number," Milo said by way of hello. "Which is it?" "Bit of both, probably. I need help." "You said that last time, and my kitchen table's currently sitting in a storage unit outside Waco because of it." A pause, less annoyed than it sounded. "What kind of help?" "I need to get into Halbrook's regional facility. Building layout, security rotation, camera blind spots, anything you can pull without leaving fingerprints on it." A long silence, the sound of a keyboard somewhere behind it. "You're not asking for a small favor, Cole." "I'm aware. Halbrook's got real security. Not rent-a-cop stuff. Card access, biometric on the sensitive floors, cameras that actually get monitored instead of just recording into a void." Milo exhaled, and Cole could picture him rubbing his eyes the way he always did when he was about to say yes to something he shouldn't. "Give me 6 hours. I can probably get you building schematics from a permit filing, and a night guard shift pattern from a payroll system that's less locked down than it should be. Getting you past biometric locks on the executive floor, though, that's not something I can hand you over a phone line. That part's on you. I'll take what I can get." "Yeah. You always do." A pause. "You sound rough, by the way." "Rough week. I heard. There's a story on the wire about a shooting at some rural property, another one about a disturbance at a truck stop off I-10. You wouldn't happen to know anything about either of those?" "Wouldn't be much of a favor if I told you." Milo laughed, short and tired. "Fair enough. Call this number back in 6 hours. And Walker, whatever you're actually doing out there, I hope it's worth what it's costing you." The line went dead before Cole could answer that, which was probably for the best, since he didn't have a good answer ready. With 6 hours to fill, Cole did what he'd always done with dead time before a job. He made a list, then he went and solved every problem on it one at a time instead of letting them pile up into something that felt impossible all at once. He left Baker at the motel with the door bolted and instructions not to open it for anyone, drove the salvage yard pickup into what passed for Merrow's business district, and came back 90 minutes later with a duffel bag's worth of things that would have looked strange laid out on a motel bedspread to anyone who didn't understand what they were for. A pair of gray coveralls from a farm supply store, the kind that could belong to a maintenance contractor at any building in the state. A clipboard, and a box of blank work order forms from an office supply aisle, the closest thing to convincing paperwork he could manufacture on short notice. A cheap laminator, a handful of blank plastic cards, and a photo booth strip from the drugstore that would, with enough care and a steady hand, pass for a contractor badge to anyone who didn't look at it for more than the 2 seconds people usually gave a badge clipped to somebody's coveralls. He laid it all out on the bed while Baker watched, half fascinated and half horrified, the particular expression of a man who spent his working life inside spreadsheets watching somebody build a lie out of glue and plastic. That's really going to get you into a defense contractor? It's going to get me past the first layer, which is usually the only layer anybody's actually paying attention to. Cole trimmed a laminated card down to size with a pair of nail scissors, focus narrowed down to the small, careful motion of it. Nobody at a loading dock at 2 in the morning is running a background check on the guy in coveralls carrying a clipboard. They're checking a box that says somebody showed up who looked like they were supposed to be there. Milo's job is getting me the rest of the way. Camera timing, door codes, whatever soft spots exist past that first layer. My job is looking boring enough that nobody remembers my face afterward. And if it doesn't work, then I find out fast, and I leave fast, and we come up with something else. Cole set the finished badge aside to dry, reached for the next one. I'd rather not need a plan B tonight. But I've never once walked into a job assuming I wouldn't. Baker watched him work a while longer in silence, the fascination slowly winning out over the horror. You've done this before. Not this exact thing. But this. Building something out of nothing to get somewhere you're not supposed to be. More times than I'd want to put a number on. Doesn't it ever scare you? Cole thought about that honestly before he answered, the way he'd started thinking honestly about most things Baker asked him, somewhere around the water off Cutter's Bite. It used to, before I learned how to use it instead of letting it use me. Now it's just information. Tells me where to be careful. Back in the room, Baker had pulled the curtain aside an inch, watching the parking lot with the wary attention of a man who'd stopped trusting stillness. Cole sat across from him at the room's small table and laid it out the way he'd been laying it out in his own head since the bridge, piece by piece, until the whole shape of it sat between them in the gray motel light. Corrigan runs security for Halbrook, buries your report, and signs off on shipping Argus anyway. That's the cover-up. Cole counted it off on his fingers, methodical. But covering up a flaw doesn't explain hiring Amcel's own security division to hunt you down personally, instead of just having Halbrook's internal people handle it quietly. That's not containment. That's coordination. With the guy who wants to buy the exact thing he's supposedly protecting. Which only makes sense if Corrigan was never protecting it in the first place. If he's not defending Halbrook's asset, he's brokering it, selling Argus out from under his own company to Amcel's buyer, using you and your data drive as the one loose thread that could expose the whole arrangement before the deal closes. Cole tapped the table once, watching it land on Baker's face in real time. Sorrell's not corporate security anymore. He's Amcel's muscle, doing double duty, making sure you disappear before you can talk, and making sure Corrigan's fingerprints never show up anywhere near it. Baker sat with that a long moment, jaw working. So this whole time, everyone chasing me, Voss, Sorrell, all of it, none of it was ever really about protecting company secrets. No. It was about protecting a sale. Jesus. Baker dragged both hands down his face. How do we prove any of that? Everything you just said is a theory built on a phone log and a logo on a gun grip. That's why I need into that building. Somewhere in Corrigan's own files, there's a contract, a wire transfer, an email chain, something that isn't deniable, something that ties his signature directly to Amcel's money. Cole leaned back, feeling the pull of the stitches along his ribs with the movement. A theory doesn't stop a sale that's probably already moving on some kind of clock. Proof might. You keep saying, a clock. You think there's a deadline. Amcel didn't send Sorrell's crew after us because he's a patient man with nothing better to do. Buyers like that don't sit around waiting indefinitely. Somewhere there's a shipment date, a customer overseas who's already paid a deposit and wants delivery. Cole's voice had gone quiet, certain. Every day we spend running is a day closer to that ship sailing with Argus already loaded, and once it's gone, There's no getting it back, no matter how much proof we find afterward. Baker looked down at the small waterproof case still in his hand, turning it over once. Why are you doing this? Really? You got paid to bring me in, and instead you're planning on breaking into a defense contractor's headquarters for a cause that isn't even yours. Cole thought about the question longer than he expected to, longer than felt entirely comfortable. Because a company decided a deadline mattered more than the people standing in front of whatever Argus eventually points at, he said finally. And because Denny Baker didn't have anything to do with any of it. And he's still dead in a hallway because I brought this to his door. That's not a debt money settles. Baker didn't say anything to that. He didn't need to. Cole checked the clock on the nightstand, did the math on 6 hours, and started thinking through everything he'd need to walk into a building that wasn't built to let him in. Chapter 17. Halbrook's regional campus sat on the northern edge of San Antonio, behind 200 yards of manicured grass and a fence that looked decorative until you noticed the sensors woven through it. 4 stories of dark glass reflecting a sky gone the color of a fresh bruise. Cole parked the pickup in a contractor lot a quarter-mile off, badge clipped to his coveralls, clipboard tucked under one arm, and walked the rest of the way like a man who'd done this walk 1,000 times and found it thoroughly unremarkable. His ribs pulled with every other stride. A dull, insistent ache under the tape he'd wound tighter than he probably should have before leaving the motel. And he used it the way he used most discomfort on a job, not as a distraction, but as a reminder to move like a man being careful of an old injury rather than a man hiding a fresh one. A slight limp sold a cover story better than a clean walk ever did. He'd learned that a long time ago, in circumstances considerably worse than a defense contractor's front lawn. Mila's voice came through a cheap earpiece Cole had picked up along with the coveralls, tinny but clear. Gate guard's name is Reyes. Comes on at 10, goes off at 6, and based on 4 months of shift logs I managed to pull, he checks his phone more than he checks anything coming through that gate. Work orders already sitting in the building management system. HVAC service call on the 3rd floor, logged this afternoon by an account I borrowed that belongs to an actual vendor Halbrook actually uses. Should hold up to a glance. Won't hold up to a phone call. Then let's hope Reyes isn't a phone call kind of guy. The gate booth was lit soft blue from a bank of monitors Reyes wasn't looking at, more interested in something on his own phone screen. And he barely glanced up when Cole leaned into the window with the clipboard held loose and easy. Evening. Got a work order for HVAC 3rd floor. Unit's been running hot since this afternoon. Cole held the clipboard where Reyes could see it without handing it over. The particular confidence of a man who expected to be waved through rather than questioned. Figured better to knock it out tonight than have somebody complaining about the temperature at 9 tomorrow morning. Reyes squinted at the clipboard, then at his monitor, tapping something into a keyboard with 2 fingers. You're not in my system. Should be under Meridian, mechanical. Dispatch runs it through a subcontractor number sometimes, messes with how it shows up. Cole kept his voice bored, unhurried. A man who'd had this exact minor bureaucratic argument 100 times and found it tedious rather than alarming. Reyes typed a few more keys, found something that satisfied him, and reached under the desk to buzz the gate. Sign in at the front desk. 3rd floor elevators card access after 8. They'll issue you a temp badge. Appreciate it. The gate rolled back, and Cole walked through it into the wide, empty plaza beyond without breaking stride. Front desk's the part one couldn't smooth over, Milo said in his ear as Cole crossed the plaza. Night attendant's a stickler. Actually checks ID against the work order sometimes. You're on your own there. The front desk attendant was younger than Reyes, alert, in a way that told Cole this part of the plan would need more than a board guard and a clipboard. He kept walking anyway, badge visible, clipboard angled just so, and caught the man's eye with a small, tired nod before the man could fully form the question on his face. Meridian, 3rd floor HVAC, Cole said, already past the desk, moving with the specific, unhurried purpose of a man who had somewhere to be, and no patience for small talk. Reyes cleared me at the gate. I still need you to sign. Copy that. I'll sign on the way out. Unit's already been down 4 hours, and I want eyes on it before it gets worse. Cole didn't stop walking, didn't look back, banking everything on the simple truth that most people would rather let an inconvenience walk past them than create a confrontation over a signature. It worked. The attendant made a note on his own clipboard and let it go, already reaching for his own phone as Cole rounded the corner toward the elevators. That won't hold if he mentions it to anyone tonight, Milo said. You've got a window, not a guarantee. Understood. The 3rd floor was exactly what Milo had promised. An actual HVAC unit, actually running warm, giving Cole a legitimate excuse to be standing in a mechanical closet with a toolbox if anyone came looking. He wasted 4 minutes there anyway, loosening and retightening a panel he had no intention of fixing, before working his way toward the stairwell that would take him up to the 5th floor Milo's stolen schematics had marked as executive. The stairwell door at 5 required a badge his cloned card wouldn't satisfy. Cole waited in the stairwell instead, listening, until footsteps approached from the other side, a cleaning cart, wheels squeaking, a woman's voice humming something low to herself. He caught the door on its slow swing closed behind her, slipped through before it latched, and fell into step a respectful distance behind the cart like he belonged to whatever late-shift crew she was part of. She glanced back once, clocked the coveralls in the toolbox, and went back to her humming without another thought spared for him. He peeled off at the first hallway junction, and she never looked back again. Corrigan's office sat at the end of the executive corridor, behind a door with a nameplate and a lock that turned out to be more decorative than the one downstairs, a standard pin tumbler Cole had picked faster ones than in worse light with worse hands. It gave in under 40 seconds. Inside, the office told him things about Grant Corrigan that the phone records never had. A wall of commendations and photographs with men in uniforms Cole recognized from another life, a desk kept obsessively clean, a leather chair angled just so toward a window with a view of nothing but a parking structure. Cole worked the room methodically, drawer by drawer, moving nothing more than he had to and returning everything exactly as he'd found it, until he reached a single locked filing drawer that felt heavier than the rest when he tested it. That lock took longer, closer to 3 minutes, sweat gathering along his hairline despite the office's cold, efficient air conditioning, his pick scraping against pins that had been fitted tighter than anything else in the building. He worked it slow, patient, aware of every second ticking past, and refusing to let that awareness rush his hands into a mistake. When it finally gave, he found exactly what 4 days of chasing a name had been building toward, a slim folder, labeled, containing a wire transfer confirmation for an amount with more zeros than Cole cared to read twice, routed through an account in the Caymans, and beneath it, a printed email chain between an address he now recognized as Corrigan's and a name he'd never seen written out before this moment, VM Cell. He photographed every page with his phone, careful, methodical, hands steadier than they had any right to be given how little time he actually had, and was sliding the folder back into the drawer exactly where he'd found it when Milo's voice cut sharp through the earpiece. Cole. Guards coming your way. Not on the schedule, one pulled. This one's a floater, does random sweeps, wasn't in the pattern. Cole eased the drawer shut, relocked it as best he could with hands that had already started to hurry, and was 3 steps from the door when it opened from the other side. The guard was older than Reyes, solid, a face that had seen enough night shifts to have stopped being surprised by much of anything, and his hand had already found the radio at his shoulder before Cole managed a word. This floor's card access only after hours. How'd you get up here? Cleaning crew held the door, figured that counted. Cole kept his voice easy, apologetic. A man caught doing something minor rather than something that would end his night in handcuffs. HVAC's been running hot since this afternoon. 3rd floor units fixed, but Corrigan's office runs off the same line. Wanted to check the return before I clocked out. Nobody logged a work order for this floor. Wouldn't be logged separately. It's the same unit feeding both. Same ticket. Cole held up the toolbox, unhurried, letting the guard see nothing in his hands but tools and a badge that at least looked right under the hallway lights. I can wait for you to call it in, if that's what you need. Figured it'd be faster to just check the vent and get out of your hair. The guard studied him a long moment, hand still resting on the radio but not yet keying it, weighing the small inconvenience of confirming against the smaller inconvenience of simply letting a maintenance man finish a boring task and leave. Cole held perfectly still under the scrutiny, resisting the old instinct to fill silence with more explanation than the moment called for. Over-talking was how amateurs got caught, every extra sentence one more thread for a suspicious man to pull on. Make it quick, he said finally. And sign in properly at the front desk on your way out this time. I don't love finding people wandering my floor without paper trail. You got it. The guard walked him partway down the hall, close enough that Cole felt every second of it, and peeled off toward the stairwell only once Cole had made a show of checking a vent grate that had nothing wrong with it at all. He made it back through the lobby without the front desk attendant looking up from whatever had absorbed his attention, out through the gate with a wave to Reyes that got half a wave back, and didn't let himself breathe easy until he was 3 blocks clear and turning onto a side street where the pickup sat waiting. You're clear, Milo said in his ear, relief plain in his voice. Nice work. Not clean though. Cole climbed into the truck, pulled the earpiece free. Guard's going to remember my face if anybody asks him the right question tomorrow. That's a tomorrow problem. A pause, then something in Milo's tone sharpened. Actually, hang on. I'm seeing something in the building's network traffic I don't like. Talk to me. There's a query just went out from Halbrook's internal security system, time-stamped about 90 seconds ago. Somebody pulled badge access logs for the 5th floor, cross-referencing against tonight's work order database. A beat, keys clicking fast on the other end. Your cover story doesn't exist anywhere real, Cole. The second anybody with actual authority checks that against Meridian Mechanical's real dispatch records, it falls apart in about 4 seconds. How long before that happens? Could be tonight. Could be tomorrow morning, when somebody in IT gets around to their queue. Milo exhaled hard. But somebody's already looking. That door I picked upstairs, the drawer you popped, buildings like that log more than cameras catch. You tripped something walking out of that office, even if you don't know exactly what yet. Cole sat with that a moment, engine idling, the photograph pages already sitting safe on his phone, proof finally real and solid in his hand after 4 days of theory. Then we're not sitting still tonight, he said, and pulled out onto the empty street, already thinking through what came next now that the clock they'd been racing had just started running considerably faster. Chapter 18. Baker was awake when Cole got back to the motel, sitting exactly where he'd left him, and the look on his face said he'd spent the last 2 hours imagining every possible way the night could have gone wrong. Well? Cole set the phone on the table between them, screen showing the first photograph page, the wire transfer with its long string of zeros routed through an account that existed for no reason except to make money hard to trace. We've got him. Corrigan and Amsel both, on paper in writing. Baker exhaled something that was almost relief and almost tears at once, scrolling through the rest with shaking hands, reading each page twice like he still didn't quite believe any of it was real after carrying the weight of it alone for so long. This is it. This is everything. It's most of it. It's not everything. Cole sat across from him, feeling every hour of the last 5 days settle into his shoulders all at once. We know Corrigan's selling. We know Amsel's buying. We don't know when or where or how they're planning to move it out of the country once the sale closes. Without that, all we've got is proof of a crime already too far along to stop. So we go to the FBI, the press, somebody. We will. But a story without a stoppable crime attached to it takes weeks to build momentum. and Amsel's not going to sit around waiting for a news cycle to catch up to him. Cole rubbed a hand over his face, thinking it through, watching the exhaustion in Baker's eyes fight against the adrenaline of finally holding proof in his hands. I need the rest of it. The timeline. The location. And there's exactly one person who might still have that, even if he doesn't know he's about to give it to me. Baker's face went carefully blank. Boss. Boss. You're going to walk right up to the man who's had you tracked for 4 days and ask him nicely for the rest of the plan. Not nicely. But yes. The burner's dial tone hung in the quiet motel room a long moment before Voss picked up. And when he did, something in his voice had changed since the bridge, sharper, more careful, a man recalculating in real time. Mr. Walker. I confess, I didn't expect to hear from you again. I've got proof, Voss. Wire transfer, email chain, Corrigan's own signature next to Amsel's name. Sitting on a phone that isn't hard to make copies of. Cole kept his voice level, unhurried, letting the weight of it land without needing to raise his volume to sell it. I'm willing to talk about what happens next. But I want to do it in person, somewhere I choose, and I want you there alone. A long silence. You understand that walking into a meeting like that is a significant risk for me. You understand that not walking into it means I make copies of everything I've got and start deciding who gets them first. I'd think carefully about which risk actually worries you more. Another pause, longer this time, calculation audible even through a cheap burner connection. There's a parking structure on Commerce Street, downtown. Top level's mostly empty this time of night. 1 hour. I'll be there. Walker. Something almost like warning had crept into Voss's voice. Come alone as well. If this is a trap, I promise you I won't be the only one who regrets it. The line went dead. The garage was 7 stories of raw concrete and echo. Cole's footsteps loud against it as he climbed to the top level a full 20 minutes early, scouting sightlines and exits with the same care he'd have given a building he intended to rob. Sparse security lighting threw long shadows between support columns. A single black sedan sat parked near the ramp exit when Voss finally arrived, alone, hands visible as he crossed the open concrete toward where Cole waited near the low retaining wall. You look worse than the last time I saw you, Voss said, stopping 10 feet off, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to run if he needed to. Been a rough week. You'd know something about that. Cole held up the phone, screen dark, more symbol than proof at this distance. Corrigan and Amsel. In writing. I want the rest of it, when the shipment moves, where, and how Amsel gets it out of the country. And if I tell you, I don't know. Then I stop believing anything else you've ever told me, which, given the current state of things, isn't much of a threat to your reputation. Cole let that sit. You're not protecting company property anymore, Voss. You never were. You're protecting yourself, because the second Corrigan finds out I walked out of his own building with proof of the sale he's been hiding, you become the loose end that let it happen. Something flickered across Voss's face, quick, controlled, but Cole had learned to read it by now. The particular fear of a professional realizing the ground under him had shifted without his permission. Corrigan called me an hour ago, Voss said quietly. Asked me very specific questions about a security breach at the regional campus tonight. I told him I didn't know anything about it, which was true at the time. His eyes came up, something almost like an apology in them, or the closest thing a man like him could manage. I don't think he believed me. Then you already know how this ends for you, if you don't get ahead of it. Voss was quiet a long moment, the concrete garage holding the silence between them with nowhere for it to go. There's a container ship. The Meridian Star, out of the port at Corpus Christi, scheduled to sail in 36 hours. Amsel's people have a slot booked under a shell manifest, industrial electronics, nothing that would draw customs attention. The drive, whatever data you're sitting on, gets loaded as part of that shipment if Corrigan gets his hands on it before then. And if he doesn't? Then I imagine the ship sails anyway, and Amsel finds some other way to save face with whoever he's already promised delivery to. Voss's mouth twisted, something bitter in it. You want my professional opinion, Walker? Corrigan doesn't actually care anymore whether you and Baker disappear quietly or loudly. He just wants this finished before that ship sails, one way or. The first round took the retaining wall beside Cole's shoulder in a spray of concrete dust, the crack of it rolling flat and huge across the empty garage before either of them had finished processing where it came from. Voss dropped instantly, professional reflex overriding surprise, rolling behind a support column with an economy of motion that told Cole this wasn't the first time gunfire had found him somewhere he hadn't expected it. Cole went the other direction, low, fast, putting his own column between himself and the ramp where the muzzle flash had come from. Rounds chased him across the gap, punching divots out of raw concrete a stride behind his heels, the sound of each impact sharper and flatter than anything the open water or the rest stop had produced, the whole structure turning every shot into 3 or 4 as it bounced off bare walls. "Sorrel," Voss called across the gap between columns, voice tight but controlled. "He's cleaning up loose ends. Both of us qualified tonight." Comforting. 2 more shapes emerged from the stairwell doorway, fanning wide the way Sorrel's people always did, professional and unhurried even now, moving like men who'd rehearsed exactly this kind of methodical box in more times than Cole cared to consider. Cole caught a glimpse of Sorrel himself near the ramp, weapon up, expression unreadable at this distance, standing with the particular patience of a man who trusted his people to close the trap without needing him to hurry into it personally. "Walker," Sorrel called, voice carrying easy across the concrete. "This doesn't need to include Voss. Man's already served his purpose." "That's supposed to comfort him?" Cole called back, already moving, using the exchange to close distance on the nearest shooter while attention was split 3 ways instead of 1. Voss made his own decision in that moment, breaking from cover toward his sedan rather than toward Cole, drawing fire that gave Cole exactly the half-second he needed to close on the man nearest his column. He came around the concrete edge low and fast, drove a forearm into the man's gun hand hard enough to send the weapon skittering across the deck, and finished it with a short, ugly exchange of fists that ended when Cole put him down against the low retaining wall with more force than strength alone accounted for. The garage became full chaos after that, echo multiplying every shot into 3, muzzle flashes strobing off raw concrete, Voss's sedan peeling out toward the ramp under a hail of rounds that punched through its rear glass but didn't seem to find him. Cole scooped the fallen weapon off the deck and used the confusion the way he'd learned to use every piece of confusion a fight offered, putting distance between himself and Sorrel's remaining shooter with short, controlled bursts that kept the man's head down rather than trying to end it cleanly. He made the stairwell at a dead run, boots hammering concrete, Sorrel's voice chasing him down the echoing shaft with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite respect either. 36 hours, Walker. You're not going to make it in time, and you know it." Cole didn't answer. He hit the ground floor a sprint, out through a side exit into the cool night air, and didn't stop moving until 3 blocks separated him from the garage and the sound of sirens finally starting to converge on it from somewhere across downtown. He found the truck where he'd left it, climbed in with his hands shaking, harder than they had any right to after everything else this week had already asked of them, and pulled the phone from his jacket to check the one thing that mattered more than his own racing pulse. The photographs were still there, intact. He thought about Voss's sedan, disappearing down the ramp under fire, about whether the man had made it clear or was lying somewhere in that garage right now, and found he genuinely didn't know how he felt about either possibility. 36 hours. A ship called the Meridian Star, out of Corpus Christi. Cole started the engine and pointed the truck south, back toward Baker, back toward a coastline he'd already crossed twice this week under considerably worse circumstances, with a clock now running that no longer left room for anything but moving fast and moving right. Chapter 19. The port of Corpus Christi sprawled under sodium light for what looked like miles, gantry cranes standing black against the sky like the skeletons of enormous animals, container stacks rising 4 and 5 high in long canyons that swallowed sound the same way the parking garage had, except here the echo carried the low groan of idling engines and the distant clang of steel on steel instead of gunfire. Cole parked the truck 2 blocks outside the security perimeter and sat a moment with the engine off, going through the plan one more time the way he always did before a job. "You're sure about this?" Baker said, watching the cranes work in the distance. "No. I'm sure. It's the only version of tonight where that ship doesn't sail with your evidence used against you instead of for you." Cole pulled his phone, opened the encrypted tip line a federal contact of Pruitt's had walked him through over a rushed call 2 hours ago, and attached every photograph from Corrigan's office, along with a plain, unembellished message naming the Meridian Star, its birth number, and the manifest that didn't match what the container actually held. He hit send before he could talk himself into waiting for a better moment that wasn't coming. Customs and Border Protection's got that now, along with the FBI field office in Houston. Won't get here in time to stop the loading, but it might get here in time to stop the sailing. Might's what we've got. Cole checked the borrowed weapons magazine one more time, set it aside, and looked at Baker a long moment. "You're staying with the truck. Engine running, doors locked. And if anything comes through that fence that isn't me inside of 20 minutes, you drive and you don't look back." "Cole, I need you alive more than I need you helpful tonight, Marcus. That's not an insult. It's just true." Cole opened his door. 20 minutes. He went in through a gap in the perimeter fence Milo had flagged from an old inspection report, a stretch where a maintenance gate sensor had been failing intermittently for months, and nobody had gotten around to a work order, and moved through the container yard in the particular low crouch that turned a man into just another shadow among 100 larger ones. He found the berth by the crane activity alone, floodlights blazing over a section of dock where a container marked with an innocuous shipping logo sat open on a flatbed, 2 men in Amcel maritime coveralls loading crates that Cole would have bet everything he owned weren't industrial electronics. A third man stood apart from the work, watching it with the particular stillness of someone who owned the outcome rather than performed the labor, mid-50s, silver at the temples, an overcoat that cost more than the truck Cole had arrived in. Cole worked his way along a container stack until he had a clean line on the man without being seen, and made his decision in the half-second it took to weigh the risk against the value of information only that man was likely to have. He came out of the shadow with the weapon low but visible, close enough that shouting for help wouldn't have bought the man anything but a faster ending. "Victor Amcel." The man turned, unhurried, and something in his face suggested he'd faced down worse surprises than an armed stranger stepping out of the dark. "Mr. Walker, I confess I expected you sooner. You know who I am. Mr. Corrigan has spoken of little else for 2 days." Amcel's accent carried something faintly Eastern European, under years of polish, the voice of a man who'd learned to sound reasonable in a dozen languages. "You've been remarkably inconvenient for a man who was, as I understand it, simply hired to retrieve a corporate asset. Plans changed." "They usually do, with people like you." Amcel glanced past Cole's shoulder at the crate operation continuing behind him, unbothered, as if the gun pointed at his chest were an item on an agenda rather than an immediate threat. "You're here to stop a shipment. I'd like to save you some time and tell you honestly you can't. Not through me. I'm a broker, Mr. Walker. I facilitate. If this deal doesn't close tonight, another one closes next month, with someone else's flawed technology, from some other company willing to trade a defect for a deadline. I'm not the disease. I'm a symptom you're never going to cure, standing on this dock. Maybe. Tonight, I'll settle for treating the symptom." Amcel's calm flickered just slightly at something over Cole's shoulder, and Cole understood a half-second too late what it meant. Actually, Amsel said almost gently, I think tonight belongs to somebody else entirely. Sorrel's voice came from behind, close, unhurried. Drop it, Walker. Slow. Cole turned with the weapon still raised, calculating the angle, the distance, the odds, and found Sorrel flanked by 3 men Cole hadn't accounted for, weapons already leveled, the math of it settling into a shape that didn't favor anything except compliance or a very short, very bad fight. He set the weapon down. Smart, Sorrel said, closing the distance, something almost approving in his voice. You've been more trouble than any job I've run in 5 years, Walker. I want you to know that's not an insult. It's the truth. I'll take it as one anyway. Sorrel's men fanned wide, professional, unhurried, and Cole used the seconds it bought him to read every angle available. The crane overhead, the open container, the flatbed's edge, the black water 20 feet beyond the dock's lip. None of it offered anything close to good. Where's Baker? Sorrel asked. Somewhere you're not going to find him tonight. We'll see. Sorrel nodded to one of his men, who peeled off toward the perimeter fence at a jog, and something cold dropped through Cole's chest at the thought of that man finding the truck, finding Baker exactly where Cole had told him to wait. He didn't let himself think past that. He couldn't afford to. Amsel had already stepped back from the confrontation entirely, watching now with the detached interest of a man observing weather rather than danger. And Cole filed that away too. Amsel wasn't going to fight, wasn't going to help Sorrel either, just watch the outcome and adjust his plans accordingly. You could still walk away from this, Cole said to Sorrel, buying time, watching the man who'd gone after the fence shrink toward the tree line. You're not actually loyal to Corrigan. You're loyal to whoever's paying, and Corrigan's about to have federal agents crawling through his email server inside the hour. Something flickered behind Sorrel's eyes, not doubt exactly, but the beginning of a calculation Cole recognized because he'd have run the same one himself. That a bluff? Check your phone in about 20 minutes and find out. Sorrel studied him a long moment, weapon steady, calculating something behind eyes that gave away nothing, and whatever he decided fast. Load the rest of it, he called to the remaining crate crew. We're moving up the timeline. It went to violence the way it always did with men like Sorrel, not with hesitation, but all at once, a single word that served as its own trigger. Cole dropped and rolled the instant Sorrel's weapon shifted, coming up behind a stacked pallet as the first burst chewed through the space he'd occupied a half-second before. He fought his way toward the fallen weapon he'd surrendered, closing the distance in short, desperate bursts between cover, taking a graze along his thigh that dropped him to one knee before he forced himself back up and kept moving, the world narrowing down to the next 6 feet of concrete and nothing beyond it. He reached the weapon, rolled, came up firing, and put one of Sorrel's remaining men down hard against the flatbed's steel edge. The second man came at him from the side, and Cole met him with everything he had left. No clean technique now, no textbook disarm, just 2 exhausted men grappling for control of a weapon between them until it went off, muffled, and one of them stopped fighting. It wasn't Cole. Sorrel himself came last, and unlike his men, he didn't rush it. He came in measured, controlled, weapon discarded somewhere in the chaos, in favor of a blade that caught the floodlight in a thin, cold line. Just you and me now, Sorrel said. Man to man. Figured you'd appreciate that more than another bullet. Not particularly. Sorrel came anyway. It wasn't a fair fight, and it wasn't a clean one. Cole was bleeding from the thigh, exhausted past anything training could compensate for, and Sorrel was fresh, fast, and had clearly done this exact thing to other men before. The blade opened a line along Cole's forearm when he blocked wrong, and again along his ribs, close enough to the old stitches that white pain blotted out thought for a full second. He didn't win it with skill. He won it because Sorrel, for one instant, glanced toward the fence line at the sound of a distant engine, his own man returning or something else entirely, and Cole used that half-second of divided attention to close the last of the distance and put every ounce of what he had left into driving Sorrel backward off balance toward the dock's open edge. They went into the black water together, grappling, the blade lost somewhere in the fall, and it was the cold and the dark and Cole's own desperate hands that finished what the fight hadn't, holding Sorrel under long past the point where either of them could have called it clean. Cole surfaced alone. He dragged himself onto the dock on arms that barely answered, coughing water, everything hurting in a way that had stopped being distinguishable one injury from another, and heard engines now, real ones, multiple, converging fast on the berth from the access road, red and blue light washing the container stacks. A helicopter spotlight sweeping down from somewhere overhead, voices amplified through a bullhorn ordering everyone on the dock to the ground. Amsel was already gone, Cole realized dimly, the overcoat nowhere in sight. Whatever calm calculation had carried the man through the last 10 minutes, apparently landing on the same conclusion Cole had reached about when to stop fighting and start running. He'd deal with that loose end later, if there was a later. Right now, there wasn't room in him for anything but the next breath and the next. He didn't have the strength left to care in that moment beyond that. He lay on cold concrete, with federal agents fanning across the dock around him, radios crackling, someone kneeling beside him asking questions he could hear but couldn't quite answer, and thought, with the strange clarity that sometimes arrived only after everything else had been spent, of a truck parked outside a fence line with its engine running, and a scared man inside it who'd promised to drive if Cole didn't come back in 20 minutes. He'd taken 23. Baker, he said, to nobody, to the concrete, to the agents already reaching him with weapons lowered and radios crackling. I need somebody to check a truck outside the north fence line. Now. Somebody did. Cole didn't find out what they found until considerably later, in a hospital bed he barely remembered being carried to, with tubes in one arm, and a federal agent waiting patiently in a chair by the door for him to be well enough to answer questions he already knew were coming. Chapter 20. He woke to the steady beep of a monitor and a ceiling tile with a water stain shaped like nothing at all, which felt, in the fog of whatever they'd given him for the pain, like the first honest thing he'd seen in a week. Baker, he said, before his eyes had even finished adjusting to the light. Right here. He turned his head, found Marcus Baker sitting in the chair by the window, instead of the federal agent he'd half expected, a bandage taped over one eyebrow and exhaustion carved deep under both eyes, but alive, upright, present. They caught the one Sorrel sent, Baker said before Cole could ask. Federal team was already moving on the port when he came through the fence line. I heard the truck. I heard sirens and I panicked. And I actually did what you told me to do for once. Drove 2 blocks and pulled over, and just sat there shaking, until somebody with a badge and a very calm voice tapped on my window. You're okay. I'm okay. Baker's voice cracked slightly on the word, the same crack it had carried standing in Denny's hallway, though this time it came from somewhere closer to relief than grief. He looked smaller, sitting in that chair, than he had at any point since the diner photograph, and older too, in a way that had nothing to do with the days on a calendar. I keep waiting to feel like it's over. It doesn't feel like it's over. It isn't. Not all the way. But the part where people are actively trying to kill you probably is. I'll take it. Small victories. Baker managed something close to a laugh, thin but real. The federal agent came by an hour later. A woman named Alvarez, who introduced herself with the particular efficiency of someone who'd read Cole's entire file on the drive over, and had opinions about most of it she wasn't sharing yet. Meridian Star's been boarded and searched, she said, standing at the foot of his bed with a tablet she never quite looked at, preferring instead to watch Cole's face while she talked. Container matched the manifest you flagged. We're looking at export control violations, conspiracy, and enough financial paper trail connecting Grant Corrigan to Amsel Maritime that our fraud people are calling it the cleanest case they've seen in years, which I'm told is not usually a compliment in this line of work. Corrigan? In custody, as of about 4 hours ago. Not talking yet, but he will. Alvarez allowed herself something close to a thin smile. Amsel's a different story. Left the country on a private charter out of a regional airfield about 90 minutes before we secured the port. We'll find him, eventually. Men like that always resurface somewhere, usually right when they think nobody's still looking. And Sorrell's men? The ones still standing? 2 in custody, talking fast, mostly trying to make sure they're not the ones holding the biggest bag when this settles. She paused. No sign of Sorrell himself. Given what the surviving witnesses described, I'm inclined to assume he's not walking away from that water, but we'll keep looking until we're sure. Cole didn't say anything to that. He thought about Blackwater and a hand that had stopped fighting, and decided some things didn't need saying out loud to a stranger with a tablet, no matter how official her badge was. There's a man named Voss, he said instead. Works or worked for a firm called Sable Group. He's involved. Might be dead, might not. We're aware. Sable's already lawyered up and started cooperating, which usually means somebody inside is angling for immunity in exchange for testimony. Alvarez studied him a moment. You want to tell me why a man in that position would break cover to help you during a firefight, according to 2 separate witness statements? I've been wondering that myself. Well, when you figure it out, my office would appreciate a call. She set a card on the rolling table beside his bed. You're not under arrest, Mr. Walker, though I imagine several agencies are going to want a very long conversation with you before this is over. For what it's worth, off the record, most people in my position spend their careers wishing a case like this would just fall into their lap. It's rare that it comes with quite this much collateral damage attached. Wasn't the plan? It rarely is. She nodded once, professional courtesy rather than warmth, and left him to the quiet. Baker stayed after she'd gone, turning the small waterproof case over in his hands, the same one he'd carried through a boat wreck and a cousin's hallway and everything since. They want this, he said. The original data, the test logs, all of it. For the case. You should give it to them. I know. I'm going to. He set it on the rolling table, next to Alvarez's card. But I'm also going to make a call to a reporter I trust before I do, because I've watched what happens when something like this only lives inside a court filing that takes 3 years to become public record. Corrigan's lawyers are good. I want this story printed somewhere nobody can quietly settle it away. That's not the safe choice. No. But you didn't fight a man to death in Corpus Christi Bay because it was the safe choice either. Baker managed something that was almost a real smile, tired but genuine. I think I learned that from watching you this week, whether either of us meant for that to happen. Cole didn't have a response for that one either, and let the silence stand in for whatever he might have said. What happens to you now? Baker asked after a while. After this. After the questions and the depositions, and whatever comes next. I go back to work, eventually. Different job, different client, hopefully one that doesn't end with a house burning down behind me. You could do something else. God knows you're qualified for 100 things after this week. Maybe. Cole looked toward the window, toward a sky the color of the one he'd driven under, leaving that diner what felt like a lifetime ago instead of 8 days. But it's the only thing I've ever been good at that also felt like it mattered. I'm not ready to give that up over one bad week, even a week like this one. The check came by courier 3 days later. While Cole was still working through physical therapy exercises a doctor had assured him would eventually let him raise his right arm above shoulder height again. No note, no explanation, just a cashier's check drawn on an account belonging to Sable Group for the full amount Voss had promised him in a diner over black coffee, back when the job had still sounded simple. Cole looked at it a long moment, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed that wasn't his anymore in any sense except billing, and then folded it in half and set it aside. He called the number on Alvarez's card instead. This is Walker, he said when she picked up. I'm sending you something. A check from Sable Group. Full payment on a job I never actually finished the way they wanted it finished. Figured your financial crimes people might find it more interesting as evidence than I'd find it as income. That's an unusual choice. Wasn't going to be paid by people who wanted a man dead for doing the right thing. Cole looked out the window at a parking lot baking under Texas sun. Call it a professional courtesy. He drove out to Cutter's Bite before he left the state, stitches freshly out, a limp he was told would fade in a month or two if he didn't push it too hard too soon. The last chance looked exactly as it had the first time, cinder block and faded red letters, Choate behind the bar wiping down a counter that probably hadn't needed it. The old man looked up, did a double take and set the rag aside. Heard some of it on the news, Choate said, before Cole had made it halfway down the bar. Heard enough to put most of the rest together myself. Wanted you to hear the last part from somebody who was there instead of a news anchor who wasn't. Cole took a stool, and Choate set a beer in front of him without being asked. On the house again, same as the first time. Denny didn't die for nothing. Whatever else went wrong this week, that part's true. What Marcus took is going to get printed, investigated, prosecuted. It's going to matter. Choate's jaw worked a moment, something old and grief-heavy moving behind his eyes. Doesn't bring him back. No. It doesn't. Cole met his eyes and didn't look away from what was there. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything either. Didn't figure it would. Choate poured himself something stronger than beer, held the glass without drinking from it right away. But I appreciate you driving all this way to say it, instead of just letting it sit. They sat with that a while, the jukebox playing something low with a steel guitar in it, and eventually Cole finished his beer, shook the old man's hand, and left him to his bar and his grief and whatever came next for a town that had already seen more of both than it deserved this year. Pruitt's call came through as Cole crossed the county line, driving a new vehicle now, insurance paid. Nothing left of the old SUV but a story he'd tell fewer people than deserved to hear it. Heard you settled things, she said, no preamble, same as always. More or less. My sergeant's been asking a lot of questions about a deputy who ran plates and pulled records for a man with an open assault complaint. Federal folks vouched for me mostly, so I'm not currently unemployed. Mostly. I owe you for that. All of it. You do. I'm collecting eventually. Don't think I forgot. Something almost warm crept into her voice despite the words. Drive safe, Walker. And do me a favor. Next time you're passing through my county, try not to leave a body count behind you. No promises. Figured you'd say that. She hung up before he could say anything else, which seemed, by now, entirely in character. Cole drove west with the windows down and the radio off, watching the land change the way it always did along that stretch of highway, pine giving way to scrub, scrub giving way to open sky, the horizon stretching flat and endless in every direction a man could look. His phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. A message from a number he didn't recognize, 3 words and nothing more. Got your message? He didn't answer it. Some doors were better left exactly where you found them, at least for now. He thought about a diner booth 8 days ago. A manila folder. A photograph of a man who'd looked nothing at all like what he'd turned out to be. He thought about Denny's steady hands on a rifle. About Choate's bottle swinging in a bar fight that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. About Pruitt's flat, unimpressed voice cutting through every bad decision he'd made this week without ever quite giving up on him. The road stretched on ahead, empty and bright under a sky just beginning to lose its heat. And somewhere out past the horizon, Cole knew without needing to check his phone, there'd be another folder waiting eventually, another name, another job that would look simple right up until it wasn't. He drove on to meet it anyway. The end.